Hello, and welcome to Danctuary.
Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Danctuary podcast, episode 13. Today, I'm joined by a lovely lineup of Raxxanterax, Neinball, Lot Fluffy, and Leviathan. Today, we're going to discuss what happened, very briefly, what happened at BlizzCon. You all know, everybody knows, everybody in the Grandma knows. The thing that we will do a bit more in-depthly later on is we'll take a look at the Diablo 4 media interviews, or grouped interviews, as you so well. This will be the main focus. We will not have the time to look at every question. We prepared 10 questions that we want to look at, and the answers that were given, and discuss what we've heard. I'm your host, sVr, for today. And I'm sure a lot of people in chat will not be entirely certain what exactly a media interview is. Why does a media interview exist at all? The most profound person on this panel to answer that question is probably Neinball, because you've been to plenty of BlizzCons and to a decent amount of interviews, I suppose. So why media interview, and what the heck is a media interview?
So the media interviews are just opportunities that they give, obviously the big media outlets like IGN and such, but, content creators, podcasters, things like that, to have a one-on-one conversation, or as of the last couple of BlizzCons, more of like a group conversation with the developers to ask their questions, from what the fans or the community really wants to know.
Leviathan, how many grouped interviews or overall like media interviews on a BlizzCon have you been? Do you know?
Decent amount at this point, because I've also done some at like PAX East and stuff. Like, they're pretty big when it comes to those conventions, because it's an opportunity where a lot of people are traveling to that one location, so you can knock out, a bunch of interviews, 30 minutes, over and over and over throughout the course of a day or two. I think they're usually pretty helpful because every person has different curiosities. And so even though you can watch like 5 interviews, you'll get very different answers or like nuances to answers, just based on how a question gets asked. Some questions are certainly more superior than others, as we were kind of talking about before we started up. But yeah, lots of interesting tidbits usually come out of those interviews.
I remember yeah, go ahead, Neinball.
Oh, I was just about to say that even sometimes the same question asked to different people, because it's not always the same people that are going through and doing the interview circuits.
Sure. So last year, we also had a D4 grouped media interview. And one of the questions that stood out to me was from Zizaran. Zizaran is a Path of Exile streamer, and he specifically had the question on how is the D4 team making sure that he sinks in enough time. And if you guys know Zizaran, he's one of those guys that streams like 500 hours per month sometimes if he wants to. And he's blasting hard, right? So you're specifically asking, like, what's the endgame thing that keeps me going and lets me blast as much as I can? That was, to me, one of the most interesting questions of last year. And unfortunately, we didn't really get an answer to this one. This year, I think we had one question about endgame. That was you, Fluff, right?
Yeah.
Do you remember what you asked? I think it was a leaderboard question, right?
So yeah, my question was, it's pretty clear the Path of Exile does this thing where they kind of trickle down hype that they talked about at GDC. Chris Wilson basically said, hey, we spend about 30% of our dev time on things that only a percent, like 5% of the player base can utilize, right? So high-end boss fights, crazy stuff like that. And but we know that kind of trickles down. Like someone will watch their favorite streamer kill the boss, and then that makes them want to play more. And it's just kind of like big brain to me. And last year we heard from Joe that basically leaderboards, as you know them, like the hyper competitiveness of the leaderboards, that's going away. He said that in the Quinn 69 sit down. And so I was really kind of blown back by his response, but 2, that's kind of where I was going with my question I asked. It's like, we know that you guys are kind of doing away with the leaderboard, so what's going to be that thing that really engages those hyper competitive high-end players in D4?
Rex, do you feel addressed by that one?
Yeah,
slightly.
Yes, I mean it's in any game, any game that I play. I mean, I know everybody's different. I'm whatever the standard plan content is for the campaign. I will blitz through it. It's gonna happen. And exactly as like Fluffy and everybody's alluding to, and Zizarin's question, what am I going to be doing for 500 hours a month? And I think Fluffy's point is extremely valid. Even if you have something very interesting for your content creators to show, then all the people watching those content creators are going to get motivated to do that. Like I'm sure people in all of your guys' chats have had people say, you want to know what Leviathan or Lord Fluffy or SCR or Neinball? I play Diablo 3 for a week and then I enjoy the season and then I quit. But then I watched you and you keep blasting, and then you're fishing keys, and that motivated me, to set a new PR on my character. I think it definitely. I think it's. I, I can't understand why anything would be more important than that than an end game of a game. I don't know what could have a higher priority to me.
Hmm. You brought up an interesting point that we've actually never really discussed, like how important is Twitch or live content for a game? Like true live content, people that stream the end game, either YouTube, or whatever platforms there are, does not need to be only Twitch. How important is that specific part, like content creation, live content creation, for the community feeling or for the liveliness of the game? How do you guys
I want
feel
to
about
jump.
it?
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I want to jump in on this real quick because I think we have like a clear example from one of the mainstays in the genre right now, which is PoE GGG. Like when they were talking about delaying the last league at the end of last year, one of the main things they were mentioning over and over again was, oh yeah, we know our content creators are going to be playing Cyberpunk, and that's an integral part of us wanting to roll out our game or roll out our league. So we want to make sure we don't make our content creators choose between us and this really hype thing that's going to be happening. And to me, that struck a big chord because it's like, wow, they really consider the content creators as part of their rollout, their marketing. I would imagine marketing budget goes into like, how do we interact with streamers, help them out with tournaments or fun events that they can do. So I think it's a big, like now more than ever, it's certainly a big part of getting your game out there.
Yeah. So to go to, that's a good point, Leviathan. To go to Matt's question directly. So I think the question is how big of an impact do like the content creators doing the stuff live have on the community? That's very hard for me to answer from a content creator perspective. I can't tell you.
Yeah,
I wouldn't be able to quantify.
Yeah, we are from within the bubble, right? So it's
Yeah, and
right.
I could play devil's advocate here for a second.
Go ahead.
Obviously, PoE, it's geared towards a hardcore PC audience, and they hit that nail on the head. It resonates with all of us, immensely. But to play, devil's advocate for Diablo and Blizzard games, I think there is still a very large portion of the audience. When we asked Matt, like, hey, like how big is the console audience? It was kind of like we got the response of like, okay, well, it's actually like it'll blow your mind. It's like PC is like a thing.
For the listener here, Matt is not me in this case. This is Matthew Cedarquist, which is the lead producer for Diablo 2 and Diablo 3, I believe.
I didn't even know your name was Matt.
Yeah,
when you guys call each other by your first names.
Yeah,
to me, I'm like, who the hell are you talking to?
Okay.
Anyways, so yeah, I think that there's a massive part of Blizzard's audience that is not represented. And so when we see like, okay, Diablo 3 on the Twitch directory and it's got like 200 people, like, oh god, dead game. I think there's a huge part of that audience that is not represented on Twitch whatsoever. And I think that, Blizzard obviously has to take that audience, which I think is probably a larger part of their audience than us, into consideration, unfortunately. But I'm just playing devil's advocate to what we're saying right now.
Well, actually, the point that I was going to make follows that one up perfectly, because like when you go through and you look at the people that are watching content, on YouTube, Twitch, or whatever, they're primarily going for the types of things that they themselves cannot do. They're not, when they're going through and they're watching maybe like a World of Warcraft PvP stream, they don't want to see someone like in 1200 bracket. They want to see the gladiators. They don't want to see someone going through and just running a base mythic. They want to see the people that are pushing mythic 20s or mythic rating. They want to see the content they themselves aren't doing. And it ties in with the points that a lot of you are making, that maybe it will help inspire them to go through and do more. It's like, oh, I can do that strategy. That's how they're doing it. I want to test that. I'm going to get my friends together and go and try out that thing. And I think it's something that doesn't quite exist in Diablo 3. There obviously is there's a huge shift in how you address going through and pushing a greater rift from, say, just a GR 100 or even a GR 120 to pushing a 150 or like a solo 140 or something along those lines. But it doesn't have, people just kind of like tune into the stream, they see the same rift, and then they go and they look at something else because it's content that they've seen. It's not something that they're barred from.
Yes. So to come back like full circle on this about, whether we're hitting the audiences or not, or what are they looking for, I can answer it much easier from a viewer. A lot of us are not just content creators, right? I assume a lot of us actually watch a lot of Twitch, and whether it's for the same games or for different games. One thing that means a lot to me as a viewer is someone's opinion of something, especially if I'm unfamiliar with it. Like, I'll watch streamers that are, experts in whatever their related field, and I want to hear their ideas and their opinions on something. For example, I might see them blitzing through a map and just destroying everything, and they might say the words, I'm sick of this build. I don't like this build. And then I attach myself much more to what they say, rather than what I'm seeing is complete and total destruction. So I'm initially thinking, "Oh, I want to play that," but then I hear the words, "This is garbage," and then you hear why, and it could be 1,000 different reasons. "Oh, this has been meta for 10 years. I don't want to do it anymore," or I spent 200 exalted souls on this, and this build I thought would way outperform what I'm doing. It's not worth it," or it's just not fun to play. I don't like this I don't like Shenlongs. It never procs. So that's the one value that I get as a viewer that I constantly look for when I go to content creators. I don't know if you guys are the same or not.
It sounded very personal. I could feel the pain in your voice.
The red runs. Everybody heard it.
The red runs shine through. Like, this is a safe space, Ryan. Let it all out. It's all good.
Man, I needed that.
All right. Now, bringing it a bit back to Diablo 4 and BlizzCon, even though I liked it, how important is Twitch, if at all has any importance, the meta discussion about that one. We're still here for a slightly different topic, right? And it's Blizzconline. It was this small event this weekend. I'm not sure if you guys noticed.
I watched a little bit.
Yeah, a couple of things happened there, right? So, first of all, just straight up, what was your favorite thing? Like, if you had to pick one thing that was your favorite thing this BlizzCon, could be anything. What was it? Neinball, you go first.
For me, I want to say probably one of my favorite things was when we got to see Bloodshed and Mr. Llama up there doing an actual interview for a panel. Like that's like so huge. And it's something that they've only done once before. Like Leviathan, like when you were on a panel a couple of years ago for the
2017
community session.
Yeah,
2017. But this one, like they're putting the content creators front and center. They're bringing them into BlizzCon and having them be the ones that are going through and asking the questions. It's taking advantage of the format that they're using this year of the streaming instead of like the live production. But it's good to see the community being acknowledged by Blizzard, and like how important they are, to the game and everything, with us, the players or the streamers and such.
I think that drills in again to my point previously. Like, it further underlines how important to these companies the like human capital is, to like make it sound kind of businessy. But the content creators, they all come with their different communities, and a lot of passion is driven into those, because you imagine like each content creator in each community kind of very distinctly cares about certain things. They've been drilling those things daily with all the videos and streams and such. And so if you can essentially get one of them on board, it's almost like a cheat code. It's like you already know this content creator and their audience is going to vibe with this, and it kind of ripples out from there. So you get this like really feel good moment, and hopefully it lends some authenticity to whatever it is that's being discussed, because you're like, well, I know if it was just a PR person up there asking questions, it's gonna be a bunch of softballs and like PR answers. But when it's kind of tied to somebody from us, then it kind of feels like, ooh, okay, they probably aren't gonna shy away from, well, hopefully, anyways, like answering real questions and giving us the juice.
That's a fair point. I feel like maybe sometimes in history they might have overdone it. I remember a hashtag paid actor from 2018 that fired backwards. We see a sad Neinball. Yeah, if somebody listening,
I'm still waiting on my paycheck.
Yeah, you're still waiting on a paycheck, right? If somebody listening in is not sure what we're referring to here, that's a joke from 2018 where Neinball got called out as a paid actor, which was very funny. That happened on Reddit. If you want to listen to the full story, the episode 6 of Danctuary is covering that one. In the later half of the episode, Neinball shares a deep, sad story about what happened there, right?
How dare the lore guy ask a lore question at the Lord panel?
Exactly.
Obviously, PR plan.
That was really good. That was 2018, right? A lot of things happened in 2018, including Immortal. And this Blizzconline, we've had some slight Immortal information. To me, that was very thin. I expected a bit more in Immortal. It felt a bit more on the marketing side. How do you feel about what we've seen about Immortal Fluff? What was your takeaway?
Yeah, I think that it was a stark contrast. So we saw the Diablo 2 panel with Llama, and I think that was honestly, and I know I joke a lot, but the best piece of PR we've ever seen from Blizzard, period.
Was that also your favorite part?
From a PR perspective, sure.
Okay.
Obviously, as someone that wants D4, it's hard to argue against the rogue. But yeah, I think that the Immortal panel was a stark contrast. No part of that panel hit for me. I love Bloodshed. I really like Wyatt Chang. I don't know the other guy, but he seems really nice. It just it felt like casual conversation. I didn't like anything really about it other than Wyatt dropping that, there's epic Endgame coming. I don't feel that we went into the panel and left the panel knowing anything different. It was just like three guys talking about a game. It was very kind of lackluster to me.
Well, especially like in your case, or actually, everybody here, because all they did was recap the technical alpha. And so if you had played in the technical alpha, or if you had been watching the streams and the content for the technical alpha, there really wasn't anything new besides fluff what you said about just a little bit more of the tease of the in-game content and like a mass PvP and such.
Yeah, that's a good call out, because like weren't the people that watching BlizzCon your like hardcore audience anyway, so they probably, if they're interested in Moral, already watched those videos and streams, and they've seen the YouTube content, like all that's played into the ground. So like where was anything? Where was the new stuff?
Yeah, I saw a comment from Greg, who was another one of the content creators in the alpha, and he mentioned that the title of that panel was Technical Alpha and Beyond, and they just missed the Beyond. Like it was all alpha review.
Yeah.
They ran out of time. They got to the and then they had to cut the stream.
It's interesting. That's true. The Beyond part was, if at all, very thin or not existent. Indeed. How do you feel, Rax?
Well, as Blizzard, I think the takeaway here is when you're setting up the schedule, you have to have your objectives of we're gonna give piece of information 1, piece of information 2, piece of information 3. And I'm not sure, it seemed very well structured for the other games, but for Immortal, as Fluffy said, it was just non-existent. It was just the technical alpha recap, which, as was pointed out, anyone who could have wanted that information already had it. I would have liked them to tell us something. Like, they did tell us that more testing phases are coming, but they no idea when. And then I think they said maybe one of them is going to be for one class and one of them's going to be for the next. And unless they truly don't know internally already, I would have loved to have seen them go, the next testing phase is coming around this time and we're going to test this class. Even that would have been something. And I don't know how much of a trap that puts them in internally. I don't work at Blizzard, so I'm not sure. But yeah, I think going forward with a plan for each game, I'd like them to, nail like however many talking points, 2 or 3 talking points that they are going to deliver. Because for the Immortal section, it was just a recap of the technical alpha, which most of the people probably had already researched already.
So,
It wasn't even a recap though. It was like, what was your favorite thing? I don't know. I just nothing hit for me.
You know, like the tone of it.
Yeah.
So at a point like this where we all kind of agree, it's like, we're sitting and we're agreeing that this might have been a bit thin for our taste. The question I would like to raise, or the devil's advocate that I want to be here, is was this maybe not intended exactly for us? Was like this section intended for somebody else? Because BlizzCon, it's a very large event. A lot of people will come back to it and watch it. And a lot of those might have not caught the info that an Immortal Alpha was even happening. Maybe that's why, right?
So my counter to that, which is probably what Fluffy would say, is what info did we provide? What exactly was said? There was a technical alpha, and a couple people had some favorite parts. But we didn't even see a screenshot of like, here's everything that was in the technical alpha. We tested these zones, these modes, this thing, these done. We didn't even have that. As Fluffy said, it wasn't even a recap. I don't know who that was directed at, to be honest.
Yeah, and that's not really learning from your mistakes either. Like, I think it was clear after 2018 that people come to BlizzCon, they watch BlizzCon to get information because they're hardcore Blizzard fans, PC players, and you're pandering to the wrong audience when you give the information that you gave. So I think that's not learning from your mistakes at all.
I think Fluff just got a message from Adam telling him to be a bit nicer. Oh, that's it. It's like strike and you're out. One more Fluff and you're out. It's like the Adam coming through. No, I'm just kidding with this one.
I'll throw out some bail for them because here's another avenue I've been kind of looking at it from. I think when you have like the way that it's panned out for Diablo now is we have so many games that it's almost like too much. And I think Riker was mentioning this a little bit too in our super long Danctuary that was on Friday. You almost need to leave some room for like the stars to shine, right? And so if D2 Resurrected is the main thing, the Rogue is sort of the secondary thing, then can you really fit one more thing in there? I think we all would say yes, but to like maybe the casual audience or like people trying to report on the stories and not, mix their messages and stuff, maybe they just want those two big highlights, those two big headlines. And 3 weeks from now or something, we get Immortal stuff. It sucks because you want it to be a part of the pomp and circumstance and like be a big, if you're gonna have a panel on it, like, really deliver on that. But I almost wonder if that was a choice on their part to be like, well, ours will be a bit more toned down, watered down. Those other guys take the highlights.
I think that's a very fair defense, especially in this panel here, because one thing for sure that will never happen is when we sit here and we say that was enough information. That will just straight up never happen. We'll always ask for more, right? So on that one, I'll accept that defense, and I think that's a very fair point. How much information is too much information, and how much contrast do you want to give to those bright stars, which is D2R and D4 Rogue, right?
I also want to quick, for anyone listening in, defend Bloodshed a bit before people are like, oh, what a shill, what a terrible interview. I know that there was probably 4 to 6 hours of content there that they pulled from. And so, probably the majority of the fault lies on the editor and what Blizzard decided to show from that interview. I know Blood had some good questions that he probably asked that did not make it through. So I just want to make sure that that's clear. So no one's like, oh, fuck you, Blood.
Yeah, so the one thing that's a little bit confusing to me from a strategy point of view is, I would guess there's a lot more overlap in the audience between Diablo 3 and Diablo 2 and Diablo 4 than Diablo Immortal, right? Because Diablo Immortal is a phone game, and the mobile market, has sometimes everybody plays all of them, but I would think the one that's a little bit different from the other ones is Diablo Immortal. And for the audience that was tuning in that was really excited about that, for that huge portion of the audience, maybe that only cared about Immortal, it probably felt, as we said, very thin to them. So if I was part of like the strategy team at Blizzard, that's something I would be thinking about. It's like, all right, well, Immortal is going to have some people that may only play Immortal. What are we going to give them here? And Yeah, I think I guess I haven't talked to any of them specifically. I don't think a lot of people from our audiences are mobile only, so probably the wrong people to ask. But I would wonder how they felt about it. Did they get enough or not? That would be critical data points for Blizzard, I feel like.
This brings us to a plan for Thursday. This is a not confirmed date yet, but this Thursday at 3 p.m. EDT, we are planning to have a Diablo Immortal episode with Echo Gaming as well as Captain Nemo from the Immortal podcast. Like, this is still, to be decided on the exact schedule. But we will have an episode where we go in depth into Immortal, and we'll also check out the Diablo Immortal developer interview that also happened. I was not intending this one because the Diablo 4 one was unfortunately overlapping, but some other people did. And we'll talk with them and see what their opinion is. And then maybe we can answer Rex's question to see how they felt or how the grander mobile community felt, right? Which brings us to the actual point of this podcast. We met to discuss Diablo 4 and what we've seen in Diablo 4. And it was our Q1 update for 2021, and it's the Rogue. And before we really get in depth into Rogue, it's like we have one person in here that is a die-hard bow ranged class guy. Levi, how did you feel when you saw it for the first time?
I'll take this one.
How did you feel? Like, tell us.
The biggest smile was across my face once I saw that first bow or that first arrow get loosened by her. So one of the things you mentioned on the I guess we're about to watch it. One of the things you mentioned on the agenda was, did you get jebaited? And I did. When the priest is originally praying, I'm like, oh, he's saying Akarat. That's a Crusader thing. Like, I guess they're going with the holy, warrior one for this. And it didn't loosen my hype any at all. But when the Rogue sat down, oh my god, I couldn't contain myself. So I'm super happy that we're getting this. This is what I was hoping for.
They played it well, right? Like, they got me in the first half. They really got me in the first half. I was sitting there like Paladin. It wasn't Paladin. It's the Rogue, right? And all right, so you saw the Rogue, and you see the ears. Like, did anyone else when you saw the ears, was it like, oh, so we'll get some PvP information? That was my first train of thought. Obviously, I'm confirmation biased right now because there will be a lot of PvP information that we'll share today that happened on BlizzCon. How did you feel seeing the ears? Was your first thought PvP?
I mean, it definitely came to my mind.
Mm-hmm.
It's like it's such an iconic correlation in the Diablo franchise. Seeing the ears, it's like this has to be something PvP related.
Yeah, it's like it can't mean anything else.
Right.
What else could it mean?
How could it? Right.
And it was even funny, Nine, because you were mentioning that Reddit thread you found where people were like, what's the fascination with ears in this thing? Like, because there are people who legit have only played D3 and there's no ears in D3, right?
Yep.
True. Wow.
I immediately didn't make that association. Like, they didn't even come to mind. And I played a crap ton of Diablo 2. I was like, is that a tongue? When I first put it down.
Well, first, you need to study some anatomy.
Right. The first camera shot, you can make an argument that looked like a tongue. But...
I'll allow it. Yes, that definitely can look like a tongue without a question. Yeah.
But yeah, I think the big thing here was it drove home sort of the continued delve into darkness that they're really aiming for as a pillar of this game. I think the ears were kind of like a nice, here's a little extra thing we can do for some of the long-standing Diablo fans. They'll recognize sort of what we're calling to here. But it could have been any other body part too, right? She could have just been throwing those things down, and you're just like, this is so disgusting. Like, we all had that same reaction to what happens later with the ears and stuff. So they drove it home in this cinematic.
Did anyone?
It's like talking about like going extra and disgusting. Just that long, drawn out, just kind of like wet noise of putting the ear on the hook.
Beautiful. Yeah.
I want to make that my text notification.
Oh, lordy. Yeah, they delivered on that one. That one is a gruesome sound.
And it's even, I mean, depending on how deep you want to look into it, it's even like the depth into darkness or whatever. It's like it's this rogue that's evil, that's killing people with her ear cut off,
Yeah.
talking to a priest who's also evil, who has a drawer full of ears. It's like
Mm.
the darkness is literally everywhere. It's like you can't trust anyone.
So that's a good
It's pretty awesome.
detail. I'm not sure if everybody of our viewers also noticed that the rogue has no right ear. So either she's Van Gogh in hiding, or she lost a fight at some point, right?
Yep.
We haven't. Did we find out? Is there like any like lore? Was there any lore info in this one on what happens to her? Do you know, Neinball?
I don't think like all rogue you would create would have a missing ear. I think that was just like that scene had one.
So it's
They-
her
they-
specifically.
So they kind of just stopped at just saying, oh, there's going to be like the class, like faction quests for unlocking your specializations, and that's about it. They didn't really go too far into actually talking about any of the lore or anything like that.
I could see it being. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Well, just one question. Did we get any info on when you make a rogue? Are you going to have to be bow or dagger, or can you be both, or are they always both? Do we have any info on that?
Yeah.
So there was an interface screenshot where you could see their equipment, and they had one section, like the left side had a bow, and then the right side had melee weapons. So you literally have both at the same time.
Yep.
But
Okay.
Wudijo asked that question specifically, and they specifically said you can
That
be
is-
one or the other.
That is correct.
Yeah, you can-
Woody did ask that question, but Rex was not in the interview, and I'm not sure if
Yeah.
he has seen it yet. So it's to defend Rex here, he wouldn't know, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah,
because
I
that
wasn't
was because they said you could be one or the other, but like for the completeness, you probably would want to go both.
Some
I
kind of
don't know
hybrid.
if they necessarily specified that. I think she was very much like, well, for me, it felt right to a hybrid, but you definitely can go one or the other.
Mm.
I'm
Just
sure
depending on your
playstyles.
playstyle. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, I was wondering if and I wasn't in the interview. I was wondering if they were going to force players to choose. Like you can't use both, but that's clearly not the direction that they're
Right.
going. So
Mm.
that's interesting.
Yeah.
That was the weird thing to me, and I want to know you guys' opinion on this. Like, so the Barb's gimmick is the weapon swap, but now the Rogue gets it. Plus, they get the 3 specs. Plus, they get all the way to imbue their weapons, and like Rogue just gets like literally 500% more than everything we've seen so far.
I
What the
had the
hell's going on?
exact same feeling. Like somebody asked me, like, how do you feel about Rogue? And I said, it feels like Rogue is like getting all the cherries right now. Like it has like the weapon thingy, and additionally, like what's also like the trailer is kick ass. Like it's a really really good and dark trailer. We don't have those trailers for each class, right? Like we don't have like a druid trailer like this, like a full 4 minutes with a bit of story and darkness and a bit more context to the class. We don't have it for the wizard and for the barbarian because those got announced together. So being a class that gets reintroduced later on or announced later on has some certain perks. That's how it feels right now. Do you guys feel the same way? Like I'm 100% with Fluffy on this one. I agree.
So
Mhm.
so I'll go the other way. I guess I'll defend Blizzard here. What I say to my community all the time is it's like in pre-alpha. So Matt, you make a good point. I would love to see the intro videos for all the classes. And yeah, the way that they introduced the classes at the first BlizzCon was completely different. I feel like they have to do it this way. The new classes that they're going to announce at BlizzCon, they better be the talk of the town for a while. But in my opinion, no matter how many bells and whistles one class has over the other, I guess I have faith in Blizzard that it will be balanced out when the game is released. So I don't put too much weight into seeing Rogue getting all the love right now. I have a feeling that it will be balanced through all the testing to kind of defend Blizzard, but that's how I take it. I'm not offended by Rogue getting all the love, and I don't, at this point in time, don't plan to play Rogue. So I want them to have the spotlight for now.
That's very fair reasoning, yeah.
Now, I was thinking
I
about
got
this morning, and one of the things that we kind of noticed from D3 was that the Necromancer ended up being like one of the best developed classes because it came last. So they had all the lessons and learnings of what they did previously to make the Necro absolutely insane. And so what I'm thinking is that's also the case here too, where as they get deeper into developing the game, they're going to get better at making classes and providing them really interesting and unique stuff. But I would not be surprised if that means they also go back and the next time we see Barb or Druid or Sorceress, they have some extra flair that they've learned from doing the Rogue.
Yeah, that's a great
like-
call out. I don't know that the other classes necessarily recovered. Like Diablo 3 in the Necro, it was just light years ahead of everything, like in terms of play style and ideas. And I don't know that the other classes ever really came back up to that level. So
True.
I mean, I think that's a good call out. Is that there's a good chance because we're still in development that the other classes could be brought up to the rogues level, but there is a good chance because this is Blizzard that they're not. So
I mean, we still have a fighting
we-
chance to change their mind on
Yeah.
this one, right? So there's time. If there's one thing, there's time.
Yeah. I mean, it's like when we played the sorceress in 2019, she didn't have the enchanting system, and then they went through and they showed that off. So obviously, those 3 original classes are still undergoing iterations and development of whatever it is that their kind of like class identity is.
And that's a good
Yeah.
call out too, because they brought up the enchanting systems. Like, well, that's sorcerer's thing. Like, that's her thing compared to the rogue. But it doesn't. It doesn't compare to the rogue. What we saw from the rogue is still like 100%, 200%, 300% more than the enchanting system.
Well,
I mean,
another thing-
I don't disagree on that one. It's
Yeah.
just more so that it's still being iterated.
Sure. All right. This is a good point to actually look at the Imbue system, since we've been referring to this one quite a lot. Now we're going to take a look at the very first question that we're going to present today from the D4 developer interview. This question is asked by Leviathan. Just for sanity of our listeners that are listening in, when I will start a question, I'll hit the play button, I will say start, and when I stop it, I'll say stop quite loud, because it can be very confusing, because Lord Fluffy is in that interview, Neinball is in that interview, I'm in that interview, and Leviathan, and for the sanity of the people listening in, you'll have to have the separation on when we start and stop with the questions, else you will be confused. So let's jump right into it, into the first question by Leviathan.
Yeah, just real quick, I wanted to talk about like the flow of combat. So when it comes specifically to imbues, is this something that we're doing prior to entering an engagement, or is it like in the middle of battle you're choosing, I'll do a poison imbue now, I'll do a cold imbue? And I guess maybe a branching from that is, will we be allowed to change skills while we're engaged with an enemy, or are we locked into what we bring in?
You're pretty flexible on changing skills. We don't do a whole lot of hard locking of things by whether you're in combat with an enemy. We don't want to encourage players opening their skill bar in the middle of fighting monsters, because we don't think trying to manipulate the UI really quickly is fun. But we're not trying to create a whole lot of restrictions. In certain endgame content, there may be some restrictions on things that you can bring in just to avoid exploits or undesirable farming behavior, where you farm something for an hour so that you can be really strong briefly. This is just to protect that. But
stop. All right. So this was the first part of the question where Leviathan asked about fluidity of combat. And I think we got a very important design philosophy answer here, which is you will not be able to switch skills in combat. Other ARPGs do allow that one. For instance, in PoE, you can just switch out skill gems at runtime at any point, anywhere. And there is no cost for you at this point to do so. In D3, we can't do so. In D4, we also will not be able to do so. How do you guys feel about that design philosophy that you can't just fight something and then, UI switch around with skills? Is that something you're in favor of?
Specifically?
Yeah, that's not what I took away from that.
Yeah.
Really?
It sounded like you could,
that's-
but they didn't want to encourage you to.
That's what
Yeah.
I
That was
took
my
what Fluffy
takeaway.
and-
I mean, I think Josh or
Yeah.
Joe specifically went through and said that they don't have any limitations on whether like your combat states of being able to stop you from doing anything.
The way I understood it really is that in combat, while in combat, you won't be able to switch it. Maybe let's re-listen to that part quickly again, and maybe sVr gets educated here. I listen to that one quite often.
Yeah, let's re-listen to it. But I took it. This is my first time hearing it, but I agree with Leviathan, Fluffy,
Alright.
and Neinball that it said you could.
Let's listen to it again.
of things by whether you're in combat with an enemy.
Oh.
On changing skills, we don't do a whole lot of hard locking of things by whether you're in combat with an enemy. We don't want to encourage players opening their skill bar in the middle of fighting monsters because we don't think trying to manipulate the UI really quickly is fun.
Mhm.
But we're not trying to, create a whole lot of restrictions. In certain end game content, there may be some restrictions on things that you can bring in just to avoid, exploits or undesirable farming behavior where you farm something for an hour so that you can be really strong briefly. We this is just to protect that. But
All right, stopping. So yeah, no combat, like you said in the first part. You guys were right. I mislistened here.
And
how do-
if I could
go
add
ahead.
in, like, probably one of the things that he's mentioning with maybe adding some limitations to, like, in-game content, just going from like kind of like a I also play World of Warcraft. When you
Mhm.
do like a mythic dungeon, like one of the higher end things that you can accomplish in WoW outside of raids. Once you enter that put in your keystone and start it, your skills and your equipment are locked. There are some exploits that you can use to change that around, but otherwise, like if that's in reference to, like, say, keystone dungeons that are going to be in Diablo 4, it might be that once you start that timer, you can't change your loadout.
Mhm.
But he does say specifically we don't lock. So
Yeah.
I would assume right now that's not the case either.
How do you guys feel about that one? Like,
So
do you guys remember Paragon switching? Just Paragon switching in Greater Rifts? Only that?
Yeah.
Like
Fantastic.
vitality
Rex
to
loved it.
yeah.
Like-
So it's kind of interesting here because a lot of other games don't lock you and it works
Mhm.
fine.
Yeah,
But in
true.
Diablo, the problem is if we tunnel vision from Diablo 3, it would totally bust the game. For example, just very simple example right now in Diablo 3, when you're pushing with Patterns of Justice, Tempest Rush Monk, you need Serenity to bridge the gap from the Epiphany downtime. Well, I don't want that on my bars. I'd rather use something else, but you could, I don't know, heaven forbid, you could macro it to pull up your skills, switch it, activate it, switch it out every time that cold came around, and that would give you a huge advantage, for example. And there's all the shenanigans where you don't have to play Wrath of the Berserker on your bar. Or let's take an even simpler example. Bone Spear. You activate Sim. It lasts forever with Haunted Visions. And you switch it for something else. And now assuming hopefully when you switch it out, they disappear. I mean, that would help. But it's interesting because from the viewpoint of Diablo 3, it would totally bust the game. But from other games like WoW, for example, you put all your skills on your bars. You put them everywhere. You have skills everywhere. You have 10,000 skills available to you, and you can keybind all of them. There literally is no switching other than you're like switching stances or switching forms or something like that. So the concept has proven itself that it can work in other games, but that's just then they're going to have to design it in such a way so it doesn't function like D3. That's what I take from it listening to it for the first time.
So here's my thought on it is I think they can actually keep it open. And like Joe and Neinball were kind of getting at, there might be some game modes or instances where it does lock down a bit more. But it all really depends on how the skills work out in this game. Like if we're going to get to a point where all of our customization is so specific towards like maybe a few skills that we're taking to like the highest amplification, then even though you can switch, you're not really motivated to because you're swapping in weaker skills or skills that don't synergize with what you've chosen for your passives, your gear, etc. So depending on how specific the system is, like if they're like D3 general buffs, like you get 10,000 multiplier for whatever skills you use, then yeah, you would hot swap everything because they're all just as powerful. But if the system truly funnels you in to I'm a werebear and I only do werebear stuff, why would I ever change to, turtle form or something? I don't know.
So that's the point of view where the more specialized your character is towards an idea, the less value you have from swapping skills essentially. The higher commitment your character has towards one archetype. I do agree. I guess that also explains why I mentioned earlier that in PoE you can swap skills at runtime anywhere, but there isn't much value to it. Maybe
I disagree.
I mean, support gems, I guess.
Ooh.
Or like the only value I see is support gems, like going from increased area of effect to concentrated effect or stuff like
No,
this.
like if you play a steel build, you could be like, oh, I'm going to switch from splitting steel to like lancing steel, and your single target goes
That's
through the
one
roof.
build.
Okay, but like your whole argument's countered because like obviously being able to swap gems on the fly is a huge advantage, and
There is a
again, I
significant
agree that
advantage to it, but does the
uh,
game break? Does PoE
I mean,
break
it is
because you
kind of
can
game
switch?
breaking because you could make a macro to gem swap, and I think that sucks, and so I'd rather see a lock than a non-lock.
Well, I guess
Interesting.
it's like the question, since I'm probably the most casual player out of this lineup, would be when I'm going through to try and tackle like the higher levels of difficulty. If I have to go through and use this mechanic and actively like skill swap and passive swap
Hmm.
in the middle of combat in order to kill like Infernal Lilith or whatever, I'm not gonna like that. As long
Mm.
as the game is designed from a point that I can keep my skills as they are, I can go through. I might have to refine my loadout and give it a whole bunch of tries, in order to go and finally get down that content. I'm fine with it if they allow the skill swapping, and that means someone like yourselves are able to do it faster than I can because you can use that system to a greater effect.
I think that this is the most interesting point of PoE 2 is that it is 100% going to solve this problem.
And
because
how
of
is
how
it?
they're changing.
How is it
Yeah,
solving it?
because you get the multiple 6 links per slot. So like you could have your 6-link Venom Gyre that's built for AoE, and then you have your 6-link Venom Gyre that's literally single target, and they're both on your bar.
That's true.
So yeah, the scary thing, like the thing that comes to mind about how will this work in Diablo 4 is let's just take a simple skill, Wrath of the Berserker. How will that work? So Wrath of the Berserker is this buff that just, to simplify, it just makes you stronger. Makes you stronger for a short period of time. So in WoW, like you can like your warrior can have like this death wish skill, and you take way more damage, but you deal way more damage, and you can, if it's up cooldown, you can pop it whenever you want. At least this is how it used to be. I haven't played WoW in a long time. That's how it used to be. So it was this buff for massive damage to use when you wanted to use it, pretty much for whatever you were playing. So if it's like that for D4, if Wrath the Berserker is in there and it's this buff that makes you stronger, can I just put it on my bar? Can I just swap to it real quick when I want to use it? And then when it's down, swap to something else? Because there is a limit on how many skills we can have on the bar, right? It's 4 skills and left and right click from what we saw in all the screenshots, at least what I saw. So am I going to have to constantly, in every barbarian build, swap in things like Wrath the Berserker or Archon or Epiphany or whatever it is in Diablo 4? How are buffs going to work? And
Yeah,
that...
that's a good question. Yeah, I think
it makes me a little anxious.
He said though that there will be certain restrictions. Like I took combat log from that one, but he clearly stated that combat log is right now at least not there. I think a reasonable restriction is really that you can't swap something out that is on cooldown. Like if you used it and it's on cooldown, that slot is locked because that slot essentially is on cooldown, and once the skill comes off cooldown, then you can decide to rotate that one out. And a similar thing with when skills are buffing you, that if you remove them, they are not snapshot on your character, and you will debuff the benefits from that skill. Is there anyone disagreeing with that philosophy?
I think that's a safe assumption.
But I don't think I agree with everything that you said, Matt. I agree with everything, and I agree that that's a good step forward. I still think it doesn't work though, because let's say that happens. Okay, so I'm playing my build, I'm whirlwinding, da 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 da. I get to a boss. Okay, then I swap in Wrath the Berserker and I pop it. Okay, and so I leave it on my bars for the duration, and then I swap it out the second it's off cooldown. Or that not when it's off cooldown, when it's done with its duration. But you're saying you're not going to allow to swap it while it's on cooldown, so we have to wait for it to come all the way back up.
Yeah, because you can't even do that in D3 right now if you wanted to. Like there are certain instances where you're like not in a battle state because you haven't engaged an enemy, but a skill is on cooldown and you still can't swap that.
Yeah.
So that might do it. On cooldown, that would do it. I thought it was only on activation. Whenever it was done, then we could switch it. But yeah, that would at least prevent it for like the really long cooldowns. Okay.
All right.
I'm trying to I'm trying to break it in my mind, but I'm sure I'll think of something later.
No worries.
We'll give you a little bit of time.
Yeah. We still have a second part of that question that needs to be answered, and it's the Imbue system, right? So let's go back there and listen to the second half of Joey Sherrill's answer to Leviathan, which now we're going into the actual Imbue system of the Rogue. Starting.
In terms of the Imbue system specifically, Imbues are skills, active skills, that when used, enchant your weapon temporarily for a few attacks with that element. So you can place the Cold Imbue on your skill bar, use the Cold Imbue, and then the other skills that you have will be cold infused and deal that additional cold effect. You could also place Poison Imbue on your skill bar. You could place them both on your skill bar at the same time. If you trigger a Poison Imbue while you have a Cold Imbue active, it will replace it. But both Imbues can be active, or all three Imbues can be active on a monster at the same time. So you could do a Cold Imbue, fire a Barrage, trigger a Poison Imbue, do a Rain of Arrows, and now you've got a monster that's taking damage over time and chilled.
All right, stop. That was the answer. Now, Leviathan, your question was about fluidity of Rogue gameplay. Do you feel like your question was sufficiently answered, and what is your takeaway?
Yeah, because the main thing I wanted to know was like if it was going to be, you're in town like prepping for I'm about to go back in. Let me make sure I'm picking the right imbue, and now my weapon is going to be a poison weapon until I come back to town and swap it. I didn't know if it was going to be like that or if we could actually like change it in the actual combat, the flow of battle. So knowing that it's a skill is good. It actually, I don't know if I like that or not, because that means like you have to take that on your bar. So it's almost like it kind of reminds me of the early Wizard days where you had a bunch of skills that were essentially passives.
I had the exact same feeling on this answer. Exact same feeling. Yeah, continue.
Right. So like you have like familiar or like, force weapon or all that stuff. And so I don't know if the iteration on that system will be that it's separate from being a skill and more like a preparation for battle, because I can almost see like a rogue like dripping poison on their blades, like getting ready the next time they go into battle they're going to pull that blade and try to assassinate somebody or something rather than just popping it up. But I mean, maybe that's also another thing that gets interesting or weird with the ability to swap skills on the fly, is that you can, since it is an active skill, take the cold imbue, cold an enemy down until it's frozen, then swap that to a poison. I don't know. Seems interesting, but I am a little worried about it.
Yeah, I don't like the idea of having like efficient gameplay, meaning you need to periodically do UI swapping. That sounds very, 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 very low quality of life. So I'm afraid of that one.
I think that's a good call out. I think where it becomes interesting is when you have to switch. Because if you don't want to switch, say I just want to be a poison, like that's just a waste of a skill slot on my bar, because like I'm always poison, right? But yeah, then the question becomes, well, how do you essentially like nerf having the best of both worlds by being able to switch? And that's where it makes sense. I think that setup makes sense when you have to switch, like because there's a kind of a penalty for like being able to do a bunch of different ailments. But the thing, real quick, I love this question because Leviathan actually got him to like tell us what Shadow Imbue was just by asking the question, like feeding on his passion. So well done, Leviathan. We found out about Shadow. So
yeah.
At first I was like, the question's like, okay, it's just rogue question. But then it's like, oh, we got juice out of that. Nice.
Got some levels to it.
Yeah.
Ryan, so you're hearing that question for the first time, right? So what was your takeaway?
Just with the skills and with the imbuing and being able to switch back and forth, I guess the general consensus is I am very against like massive microing in the ARPG genre. I mean, microing is awesome in like StarCraft, and to some level it's great. I'm very for like very advanced gameplay and very strategic gameplay, but like for example, like in some people play solo Diablo 3 and they put on homing pads and they're force moving while spamming TP to get, damage reduction. Like that kind of stuff is if it's not disheartening to us, I'm pretty confident for the casual players, the massive player base. It's insanely disheartening to them and they don't want to do that. So
I do
I'm
not.
all for
Same.
So I'm all for a very complicated combat system, but just not with massive microing, UI swapping, tons of swapping. Whatever they can do to iterate on that to make it comfy for everybody, while still giving like at least close to maximum value out of your characters. That's what I would caution against.
I love micromanagement and having a ton of different things you have to pay attention to on a build. I can't stand when builds are like 2 clicks, 3 clicks.
But
you just put your buffs up and do the thing. Ugh.
So if that's the case, how much do you hate whirlwind builds?
It's literally the worst build.
Yeah? Okay.
I hate it so much.
So
Yeah,
I hear what
that
you're
makes
saying,
sense.
Fluffy, but is there a difference between, a complicated build with a lot of things to pay attention to and something that is micromanaged so much that you're not going to have a chance against someone that like macros the entire thing? Someone's
Yeah,
going to
that's a good-
macro every switch and just murder you, and you're going to be like, all right, I inventory switch to put on this chess piece, close. Oh, I'm dead.
Right. I agree. There's a big difference between like intended micromanagement and unintended micromanagement. And yeah, what you're saying is I think leaning towards the unintended and like the gear swapping or like stuff that you would never think to micromanage, but you have to anyways. Yeah, I don't like that, obviously. But
Complex builds focusing on buffs and debuffs and mechanics and itemization and all that and density, that's fantastic. Literally microing, switching items, switching skills, switching imbues, that to me is bad.
All right. That summarizes it on the imbue system. Now, does the rogue as an archetype to you guys, does it seem appealing and does it fulfill for you the fantasy of the ranged bow DPS class? To me, it definitely does, even though it has this dagger and stealthy component of like sneaking up on you and, like assassinating you from behind. But to me, it definitely fulfills the role of, yeah, if I want to play a bow class in D4, if that ever happens, then I know which class to pick, and it's gonna be rogue. Do you guys have the same feeling in terms of fantasy?
yeah, I think that's a fair assumption. I think that, if it was just like Ranger or something like that, where you're like, the class feel is just a bow, like, well, I'm never going to touch that class because I don't like bow builds. Like, that's just not my thing.
Sure.
So I think that they did a good job of like being able to split it and then even maybe give you a taste of bow skills if you want, because, they got the hybrid stuff built in. So then maybe you become a bow lover over time or something like that. But yeah, for me, honestly, like if we don't get Necro, which I can't imagine we won't, especially with this sneak in announcement of Barbs can wear shields. I think that this would probably be my main, a poison melee rogue. But
for me, I'm glad that, obviously the bow and arrow thing is super hit by this, but one thing that was really cool with D3 was the shadow rework when they eventually made it a 6-piece set and gave it to the Demon Hunter. That opened up that whole melee aspect, and it was like a refresh on playing Demon Hunter, and now we're getting it sort of out of the gate with both playstyles. So I'm actually glad that they didn't go just the most stereotypical expression of the archetype, but instead sought a way to make it a bit more intriguing. Like I saw a lot of WoW players being like, ooh, there's some rogue stuff here, like rogues can shadow step. There's a lot of that shadow element coming in with D4 rogue, so they're kind of pulling from in the combo system. Yeah, exactly. They're pulling a lot of different unique stuff from elsewhere all together in this one class, which should make it a way more robust experience.
So Lord Fluffy already gave a quick glimpse on this one on, what could be the last archetype to fill and what do you guys want it to be. We know they updated the website, so if you go to diablo4.com and you open the campfire scene, you are able to see a silhouette of the last character, and we know Diablo 4 is gonna release with 5 classes. What do you guys feel might the silhouette look like? What would you guys mentally fill in here? Like, Neinball, you want to go first here?
Go ahead.
I mean, I'm definitely I'm of one mind with Fluff here, and I want the Necromancer more than anything in the world. Definitely my favorite archetype when it comes to Diablo or fantasy genres and such. But that silhouette, I mean, it's like, is it is it like is the person wearing a coif, or is it just like the long hair that's so well known with the necromancer and such? Because it
Mhm.
just kind of like blends into the back of the neck there. It's really hard to say. It doesn't have like the super bone like skull shoulders and such, but I mean everything else in the D4 is a bit more subdued in terms of like the realistic armor sets. So
So
it could just be like wearing
This
some
is
leather or something.
this is like one of those Rorschach blot tests where it's like,
Right.
Rorschach
what do
ink
you
blot.
see? Yeah. What do you see? You're gonna see what you want to see.
all right. So
Yeah.
so I
That's true, because I see a paladin there, but I definitely want a necro.
Okay.
Obviously.
so
Mhm.
I agree with Fluff on this one. I also see a paladin, but I wanna see a necro there. Neinball
Right.
brought up the point of like the classic bone shoulders, right? Where you have like bones looking out of the shoulders, right? Now they could have like, even if it's a necro and assume it is a necro, they couldn't give us the bone shoulders here, right? Because then everybody would know. It's like
Yeah.
if it is a necro, it can't wear bone shoulders here, right? So if there will be a necro release, and in the future in this campfire scene he will wear his classic bone shoulders, then whatever. But I think this would have been too easy of a giveaway. So just because of that, I wouldn't say this is particularly not a necro at this point. How do you feel, Ryan?
Yeah.
What would you fill in here?
Wait, if someone were to show me that shadow and ask me what I think that looks like, with 100% without a doubt, instantaneously, I would say it looks like a necro. That looks like a necro to me. The
Defend.
the art defend. It
Yes, defend.
Blade!
Explain.
If it's not a helmet, it looks like the necromancer. It looks like the necromancer has its long hair, and the way it's kind
Thank
of,
you.
it almost looks like it's hunched over a little bit. It's not like quite like a witch doctor that needs like at least 30 visits to the chiropractor, but
Oh Jesus!
it's not this big, it's not this big, tall defender of, holiness. I apologize, Neinball. I don't know anything about lore, but it doesn't look like a paladin to me, and it doesn't look like a crusader to me. It looks like something slightly hunched over, kind of skinny, and if it's not a helmet, it looks like it's got hair. But looking at it from a strictly like archetype perspective, so we have the magic, we have the melee, and the rogue also kind of dips into melee. And one thing that Diablo 4 is like completely missing, like almost entirely, unless I'm missing something, is they don't have any pets. They don't have any pets. They don't have summoning anything. So
Yep.
I am fully expecting whatever the 5th class is to summon something, to have little friends helping them out. So the one that makes the most sense is the necromancer, unless they go with some other new kind of summoning archetype. But to me, that
Swear
looks
to
like a
God.
necromancer.
If they go with some new summoning archetype, we riot.
We riot.
One thing that people have thrown out there as counterpoint to the summoning aspect is that the druid typically has had some summons like ravens and wolves and things like that. We haven't seen it, I don't think, out of gameplay for D4 yet. But if they are going to pull on some of that, then they should have a couple skills for it. But personally, to me, that's not enough. Like I'm in agreement with you.
Well,
with
I
all
mean,
the
in Diablo,
Yeah,
Diablo 2, druid summoning wasn't enough. So
right, like druid summoning, like that's like wanting to get Mexican food and going to Taco Bell, right? I mean that druid's not a summoning class. Yeah, they have
Especially
two
as
like
we
a hobby.
saw in the demo, we saw like it'd be like saying Demon Hunter is like a pet summoner in Diablo 3 because it has like the wolf.
Right.
That's exactly how we
Yeah.
saw pets in the demo for Druid.
Yeah, it's definitely not justification against like, oh, we can't have summoners now.
All right.
So what are we missing? We have magic, we have nature, we have like a shapeshifter, we have a bow, we have a big brawn melee guy, we have a dagger wielding guy. I mean, we're missing summoner. Maybe we're missing like a holy thing.
Yeah.
So
What else are we missing?
From like a gameplay perspective, the two big things that you're missing is more of the, even though they kind of like said that the barbarian can use a shield, you are missing your more like your sword and board type class, like your tank. In the summoner, I think, are the two like gameplay aspects that you're missing. As far as thematics, you are missing the holy warrior, the
I
crusader.
don't think you're missing sword and board at
Templar.
all. Like, barbarian can be just as meaty and tanky as a crusader with a shield on. To me,
But
You don't
another
have to
thing
run
is-
around with your shirt off like a barb does. You can be fully juiced up in heavy armor. Like.
Well,
But
another
there's
thing is-
there's nothing in the barbarian toolkit or its skills that make you feel as if your shield is adding to your gameplay like it does with the Crusader.
That's a
So
fair
Just because you
point.
put a shield on in Artanki doesn't fulfill that actual like gameplay role of going through and playing like Invoker's set or something along those lines, or Shield
Hmm.
Bash.
So one thing that I'm constantly yelled at all the time is, Rax, you don't have any idea what the difference between an MMO or an ARPG is. You just don't get it. So like I'm trying to learn from my past mistakes. And do you guys feel that a sword and board archetype is absolutely probably required for like an MMO, right? You go fight the dragon, you have a bunch of people, someone needs to stay alive. But in ARPGs, for most of the time, you're just getting out there and just trying to kill stuff. I mean, all of these classes are supposed to be DPS. Yes, the Crusader specifically, when they put on a shield, they have all these cool things and they can dominate with it. But I guess if I'm designing an ARPG, I'm not requiring any kind of fantasy that's more on the tanky side. I don't care if everything is out there just to murder everything. Am I off here, or how do you guys feel about that?
No, I think you're right, and you're almost marrying both points that Fluff and Nine were making, which is that I think Nine is leaning more towards the side of like the shield is the iconic part of the Crusader, and it's not just there as a defensive mechanism, but it's also offensive. It also debuffs, it buffs, like with shield glare and things like that when you think of some of the past Crusader stuff. But you don't need to have a shield to be tanky, which I think is kind of what Fluff is getting at too. Like you can make these tanks that are, taking a bunch of skills and they are going to be the front line of your party. I think one thing that you do mention when you bring in MMOs is that there's also healing, right? And so the Crusader with its holy aspect, or Paladin, we haven't really seen any healing or like group-based kind of sustain. And so maybe that's a checkpoint for a Crusader or Paladin instead of a Necro, unless you have like some Death Knight that can also like take health from enemies and give it to party members. I don't know. It's a couple ways.
Just cast Leech and you're fine.
Yeah, the only healing we've really ever seen is like the support monk, right? Which not really sure if support builds were ever intended when D3 was designed. Did the developers ever come out and actually specifically say that they never designed support builds? They were just like created by the D3 base, like the players.
I mean,
I don't think
mantras and a couple of runes on like for instance tranquility and all that stuff. That kind of speaks of like some conceptual ideas of helping the group. Being dedicated support, like fully dedicated support, that's a rough question. I don't recall any time in the last couple of years where this question was answered. Correct me if I'm wrong.
It was. There was a blog.
Yeah.
There was a blog post from Wyatt, and he
Okay.
said that we don't make builds specifically for the purpose of support.
Gotcha.
that's
we
what I
want
was
everyone to be a
remembering.
DPS.
Yeah.
All right. Cool.
So does anyone think, like, truly, at the end of the day, it has to be Necro, right? Because that would be a huge hole. I mean, we want it to be a bunch of things.
It
but
needs
I
to
can
summon
play.
things.
yeah.
Yeah, I could play devil's advocate to my own wants, because this was the response that I gave, on Friday's episode, was that you have the druid, the sorceress, and the barbarian. You're bringing back these three iconic classes. Then you're bringing back the rogue, from the original Diablo, and that if the developers themselves kind of like want to flex a little bit of creativity, or their own, like, express like something for the team that's unique, that fifth class is going to be something like brand new. It might fall into like that summoning archetype or what have you, but it's probably going to be something all completely different that we've never seen before.
All right. On that note, I love to discuss archetypes with you guys for hours to come in future episodes. But today, we need to move on at some point, and we just had, the discussion about Rogue. It fills the spot, right? Just to summarize everything that we said into like one word for each of you. Now, we forget about the silhouette. You get to pick the last spot, and nobody will ever find out that you picked it. What will it be? Just one word. Leviathan.
Crusader.
Lord Fluffy.
Necro, where do you...
Neinball.
Necromancer.
Rax.
Shaman.
Necromancer for me. let's move on. The next section that we will discuss and we got announced was PvP. We got a huge PvP announcement, and we'll go into the developer interview and listen to Karina Kingdom explain to us what the PvP system is about. Let's listen in. Starting.
One of the areas that you can come across are the Fields of Hatred, which is a set area that you walk past in the open world that anyone can enter. And a big part of it is there's this bubbling up evil from Lilith's presence in the world is increasing Mephisto's influence. And through that, every creature that you find in those areas will drop something that we call Shards of Hatred, which is a currency that allows you to unlock new cosmetics, new armor sets. There's chests that you can open up to gain unique rewards to that area specifically. You have the choice of going hostile, which means you have the ability to attack other players and other players can attack you. You aren't by default, when you enter these areas, you're not hostile by default. So once you've gathered all these Shards of Hatred, there's a purification process that you enter. You channel them basically, and you have to defend that area from monsters. Whilst you're doing that, you actually can be targeted by other hostile characters that can sort of steal the loot that you've been sort of trying hard to gather, and that's where the PvP element comes into play. Joe, did you want to?
No, that's absolutely right. I would add that you can be targeted by hostile players anytime you're in a PvP area, in addition to that key moment when you're purifying shards.
Stop. All right, so this is the PvP system that we just listened to. Lord Fluffy had a interesting comparison to a different game on Danctuary Live on Friday. What was that about? Can you give us a enlightenment here? What happened there?
Yeah. So, I mean, P-Child's expert on this because he's the okayest variety streamer I know. But yeah, so it's basically from the Division. It's you go into the Dark Zone and you try to get the loots, and then you try to make it out with the loots, which I think works really well. I'm not shitting on Diablo for taking this idea. I love when games steal ideas from each other if it works. So yeah, it's definitely that, and P-Child can explain it like way better because he's actually played it. I think the big interesting topic on this panel was when P was like, why not the loot instead of just the shards? And his point was like, you see the loot and you're like, oh my god, this is so insanely good. Like it's a primal, for example. God hope there's no primals. And you want to make it out with that thing because it's like the best in slot for your character forever. And you're just like, I gotta get out of here. And then people see that that's the thing. And they're like, I gotta kill this dude. I'm gonna do everything in my power to kill this dude. Versus just like, oh, he's got 500 shards. I want those shards. It's just like, it's not nearly as exciting, which is the point he was trying to make with his question. But yeah.
Yeah, that's a direct follow-up. Let's listen to it right away. Let's also get that one in. Let's start.
All right, we're going to stay on the topic. We do have a follow-up from P-Child. Go ahead, take it.
So are the shards the only thing that you're going to try to extract from there? I was curious if loot is going to drop from these monsters that is also stealable by other players. I think that adds a pretty hype level to the PvP environment.
Monsters in the Fields of Hatred will drop loot. There's no current plans to make that loot specifically stealable by other players, but the Shards of Hatred will drop if you are killed by someone else, and they're currency that are used to acquire things from the vendors in the PvP towns. For example, we have some very cool cosmetic armor looks that can only be obtained from the shards.
Stop. All right, so that was what Lord Fluffy was referring to, the question by P-Child. Brilliant question. I love that one a lot when listening to it. How do you guys feel about that one? Should loot that so you can loot in there, monsters can drop some good stuff for you. Should that also be, should you be able to lose it when you die?
Oh, go ahead, Ryan.
Absolutely. That's the end of my comment. Absolutely.
Easy.
The PvP zone.
Easy.
That's it.
Okay. How do you feel about that one, Leviathan?
It reminds me of Heist, actually.
Yes. I had the same feeling.
And so I liked in Heist that there was this immediate urgency to get out with your goods, especially if you picked up like an Exalt or some crazy replica unique and you really wanted it for your build. You're like, all right, I'm going to play it as safely as possible to get out of here. I think it could go two ways. That is really exciting, especially if they do like lots of call outs and things, right? Like say some insane piece drops and like a alarm or like a ding goes off to signify that. And you can see like, I don't know, like a beam coming out of some player to know they have something super valuable. I
Oh
would
my
love to
God.
just see like that.
Oh, he becomes a
chaos, like-
treasure goblin and people chase him. And
Yeah,
the
and you
person
got, like,
tries to escape. Oh, Lord.
You're in a party
yeah.
and you got your bodyguards and stuff. Like it could be really interesting gameplay at that point.
Oh.
The other side of it, though, could be that if it does stay just shards, like what if there is a PvP vendor that they're mentioning here, and there's like a 1 of 1 in there, right? It takes like 1 million shards to get like some crown that is the PvP crown, and first person who gets it, there's like a server alert, and you're super hyped to be the one to get the call out for that. That does put more emphasis and importance on getting as many shards as possible. But I think the point that Pete Child was really bringing up here was that shards are going to essentially be infinite, right? They're just going to always exist. Whereas like if some crazy piece of gear drops, that might be the only time you see it that week or something.
I think the heist is a bad comparison here because, you know, the danger in the PvP zone is being killed by other players. The danger in heist is falling asleep before you escape.
Lol.
So
Lol.
So I guess one thing
Lord.
for me about losing more when you die is I think a lot of PvP games that I've played in the past put way too much of an emphasis on killing others and not as much of a penalty on dying. I mean, PvP, in my opinion, should be not just about how many people can you mow down in 30 seconds before your glass cannon character can die, but it's also a function of can you stay alive? Like, I would rather go 1-0 than 5-1. I don't want to die. So I think it would actually encourage players to, I don't know, play a little bit more skillfully when there's more to lose. That's why I'm so in favor of it. And also, this is like usually never a reason why I would support anything or the other, but maybe Neinball will appreciate this. But if it's a PvP zone, I want the fantasy of a PvP zone. Whatever you pick up there, whatever you acquire, if you die, you should lose it. That's just my opinion.
All right, so you essentially want to have more skin in the game. If that statement worked, like that's what the Germans say that one.
That's exactly it.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, sure.
To
I
play
can see
devil's
that.
advocate, though, if there's more to lose, the people will probably be less likely to join.
Yeah, it
if they're
could
not
lead
confident.
to.
But Fluffy.
True.
Fluffy, if you're signing up to PvP, let's come PvP.
Listen,
you gotta
you're
you gotta
preaching
lose
to your
some
own
shit, dude.
audience here. I'm with
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
I just know that doesn't work for a lot of people.
I absolutely agree with the devil's advocate on this one. A lot of people are hesitant, and it might lead to the PvP zone being a wasteland, like just an open and empty wasteland, right? This is something that Joey Shelley also states later on the question about PvP deaths and hardcore deaths, whether or not this should be a permanent death in hardcore if you die in PvP or not. But we'll get to that one later. So how much like commitment to you could lose something should be in a PvP zone? I personally also agree. Items, if there would be even like, if there could be items that only drop in PvP, and you need to safely escape with them from a PvP zone, would you guys be in favor of this? Yes or no?
Well, I mean, from going with this interview and then also like the Diablo Q&A, it made it seem as if like these shards of hatred are like purely for cosmetics. Like,
yes,
you can get like loot off of the mobs, but it's just going to be the loot that drops
normal
anywhere
loot
else.
everywhere.
Yeah, it's nothing special. There's nothing special about these PvP zones besides cosmetics. And like the downside of that is you're kind of like unless they're going to continue to add more to it, you're one and done. You know, I'm going to go through and I'm going to grind these fields of hatred for a week. I'm going to get my full PvP set, and then, you know, what am I going to spend my time doing? Either doing more PvP just to do more PvP because I enjoy that game mode, or am I going to go and run dungeons or world bosses or, you know, whatever in-game XYZ system is in order to actually progress my character? You know, it doesn't, because right now, you know, kind of going back into like Rax's point, there really doesn't feel like there's any skin in it. You know, you're like there's nothing really to be gained outside of cosmetics. For a lot of people, sure, that's a big component of, you know, wanting to go and show off that I've got the biggest and the best. I'm the best PvP player on the server. But for a lot of other people, there's no incentive to come back.
So if I could summarize your statement in one question, is it amongst the lines of, should there be an endgame reward system with this PvP system, yes or no? Is that essentially the philosophical point that you're trying to raise here?
Yeah, there should be something else that you can gain from it besides just the cosmetics.
And you would answer it with yes. I would also answer that question with a yes. What about you, Leviathan? Specifically because you are a hardcore player at heart, right?
Right. I do think that there's actually something Rax mentioned brought me back to the Immortal PvP and the fact that, like, you may not be a PvPer, but the result of what you get out of going to that Battlefield arena is so good because legendaries were so hard to come by. It made you at least want to give it a try. And so I hope that there is some mechanic that gets you in beyond just like cosmetics, because I could see a lot of people being like, well, it's only cosmetics, I'll skip it. But if there's something extra as a hook that gets you into PvP, then it could become another one of your game modes, because I don't want it to become a set dungeons or challenge rift where like you do it once and then you kind of forget about it. An easy solve for that could be that, yes, there are these cosmetics that you can get from the vendors, but what if there's just like, you know, 1,000 shards gets you a random item, and it could be like gambling, right? Like maybe you get a rare, maybe you get a unique, and that's another reason to just, you know, at least go pull that slot machine. And if you like the PvP, you're getting something out of it over time.
I can definitely see Blizzard doing like a daily, like, oh, go kill 3 people in the zone of hate or something like that.
Or like you cleanse 5 shards.
So
Stuff like that.
yeah, let me do my best to take the perspective of the casual audience here. So we have there's 2 different things that we're thinking about. We're thinking about how much skin should be in the game when you PvP, and what should be the reward system. So first, talking about how much skin should be in the game, even for casuals, I would argue, even for casuals, even if they don't realize it, game modes or certain aspects of a game can actually be a lot more fun, even as a casual, if you have something at risk. If you play the I win game, you load it up and you just win, and you just win, you're gonna get bored of it in about 7 minutes. You're never gonna play again. So, I don't think losing the items in that particular zone is that much of a penalty to pay. If you lose all the items you're wearing or everything in your inventory that you carry in, okay, that sucks.
I have to disagree here, man. Like, I'm sorry to interrupt, but a lot of people are really afraid of just losing stuff, right? It's like doing something and then being weaker afterwards, or the feel that you invested time and you were weaker afterwards for some specific reason, and losing progression, that feels horrible to a lot of people.
But
not to me.
Losing progression because you didn't have it going into it. Rax's point is more so you're going in there to have a chance at getting something.
It's that, but it's also not going to be Diablo 3, Matt. You're not going to go to the PvP zone, kill a goat, and have 10 items drop. That's not going to happen, right? You're going to get like 3 items while you're playing if you're there for a while. And if someone if you see Leviathan coming after you with your rogue, you better run or you're going to lose those 3 items. I'm sorry. But that makes it more fun. You know, you're kind of playing and you're like looking around like, God, is Lord Fluffy coming out with Necromancer?
Yeah, that more skin in the game and like this fear of losing the item that you just found is fun, and it's also fun to me. But I want to attack the idea that even for casuals, it's impossible that they wouldn't feel bad. I think a lot of people will feel bad. That's how I feel about this one. Maybe not anyone in this panel, and certainly not me. I don't mind. I'm okay with that one. Leviathan should come from my items. Let's go. Let's rumble. But I feel like a lot of people, I mean, I guess the best thing to settle this is if you are listening to this and you're on YouTube, let us know in the comment section. Like, go all caps in hate to lose items in PvP or love to lose items and have more skin in the game. Maybe the sample size of our viewership is a bad distribution and a bad idea and a bad sample size for it. But I would say that at least 50% of the people will go, I do not want to lose anything in PvP. That's my take.
All 17 people would agree.
Thanks, Mom, Dad.
So hold on, Matt. So
yeah,
I agree with you. There is going to be a huge chunk of casual players, and maybe even any kind of player. There's going to be a huge chunk of players that don't want to lose any items. What I'm challenging the idea is if you have that moment where you feel bad that you didn't get away and you got killed, that actually adds to the game. Having moments in a game where you feel bad when something didn't go your way. It's like Lord Fluffy was talking about on, I think on the new Meta podcaster here. I can't remember one of them. He was talking about how he loves in Path of Exile how he can ruin an item. It's got huge potential. You YOLO it and you mess it up. That heightens the time when you do go into the PvP zone and you do have a bunch of items and you got killed 5 times and here comes Leviathan. Oh, surprise, I'm ready for you this time. And you kill him and you get his stuff too. And then you get out. You're 100% right. There are people, especially now, that are going to be in the YouTube comment. It's going to be all caps. Let me have everything. But my argument is isn't it a good thing for the game to give you the opportunity to have those moments where you feel bad and you mess up terribly? Isn't that a good thing or no?
It is a good thing to me, without a question. But there are plenty of people. So I imagine that Lord Fluffy was probably referring to Val orbing and double corrupting, which is an amazing concept of syncing your items and trying to get like the last % out of them. I am one of those person, like, if I hit in like an amazing roll on my Harvest Craft, I'm like, all right, time to double corrupt. Like, I don't mind. Like, I don't mind putting this item at risk to just get an insanely stronger version of it. But there are like so many people that will just say, oh, I never Val Orb. I don't play that game. I don't play the game of like 1/4 of a chance to entirely brick and delete my item. They will never go ahead and, use their 6-link chefs that they worked for, I don't know, a week to double corrupt it for +1 socketed gems or something like this. This is something that only very few people do. And we do it. What a question. So I'm definitely not reasoning against the Val orbing, risking your item, getting the next stage out of it, because I love that one. I'm dying for that one. The second I have this item, like, let's double corrupt, let's go. Oh, I bricked it. Well, I never equipped it, so I'm okay. To me, that's okay. A lot of people just don't like to have the safety, though.
I think there's something to be said about indoctrination, though. Like, hardcore is a mode that exists, but you're not forced into it. PvP will be a mode that exists in this game, but you're not forced into it. However, I don't think we should start stripping out features from it because we're scared that casuals will be upset if they lose their items.
True.
They can go into it and try. The same way I've converted tons of people that come to stream. We were kind of talking about this earlier, like the inspirational part of watching somebody do something. There may be a bunch of people that say, I'll never touch PvP, but then they're watching Rax's stream and he just outplayed like 3 rogues and got all their stuff. Damn, that was a really hype moment. And what if I go try and do something like that later on? And, if that exists for these, I think you want to have these like highlights and memorable things like, when was your, craziest PvP moment? When did you first drop that win force? The more things we can get like that, I think the better D4 will resonate for a lot of people over time. And we want this game to last a long time.
Yeah,
So,
like
go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, some of your best experiences in games are, counteracted by your chance at failing at what you were about to do. It's like, you're anything that's just like a win-win scenario. It's not gonna like really form all that great of a memory. It's not gonna be something that sticks with you as an experience. But when you had a great chance of losing, playing a hardcore character for the first time and going through and trying to beat Inferno, Diablo, or something along those lines, those are memories that you're going to keep with you because of the risks that were involved with it, regardless of what the rewards might have been. And I think like the current PvP scenario that they have going on, where it's just cosmetics and such, there's not a lot of risk of things that's going on, and at the same time there's not a lot of reward either.
Yeah, I think that is the bigger argument here, is that like cosmetics, I don't know if that's a big enough reason to want to go in there.
I think we all agree on that one. right?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, true.
Yes.
But we all agree on that one, right? Like, we all would like a bit more skin in the game and a bit more
Mhm.
things to do than just MTX for PvP.
Yep.
Right.
And one
Yep.
thing that I think is extremely important to explore is, again, we're talking about the reward of PvP. And I will say, first of all, from my perspective, I do not care which system they pick. It will not matter to me at all. So especially when something doesn't matter to me, the first thing that I go to is I go to the casual. I try my best to think about how the casuals feel about it. So now let's think about the PvP rewards, like not just the the stuff that drops or whatever, just the entire thing. Like, what can you get out of it if you spend your time PvPing in this game? I think something that might be a huge booby trap for Blizzard, which may really dishearten a lot of casual players, is if you have something really awesome, something super fantastic that drops only in PvP.
Mm.
Now,
Mm.
while I would be fine with it because I will PvP to get that, I think there's going to be some people, what a lot of casual players like to do, I think, is they like to like achievement hunt, for example. Try to, as they play their time, they like to complete the game at their own pace. If there's like this godly unique that they need for their build that they have to invest, they're forced to invest a lot of time PvPing in, I think they're gonna find that extremely disheartening. So then I start to think about, okay, well, how do you make the PvP system really rewarding for the people who want to blast it, but at the same time don't cripple the casuals who don't want to spend their lives PvPing and getting killed by Lord Fluffy's Necromancer? So then I think about, well, if there are really good items, like top tier items that drop in PvE, like level 100 Lilith only drops these certain uniques, could it also be possible to get them through PvP? And those are like the only two places you can get it: high end PvP or high end PvE. Maybe some system like that. But do you guys think that it's going to turn a lot of people off if you have these unique, specialized PvP only rewards that the casuals can't get? And how do you feel about it?
Yeah, I feel it's, while it might be good for some of us on this panel and might be very interesting to have it, for the grander like happiness of the community, it's likely better to not gatekeep anything, like not have any item, any resource gate kept that is useful in terms of power behind PvP. That is my stance. I
Sorry.
don't think there is a sequence of words that will change my opinion on this one.
What
but
about cosmetics though? How about
cosmetics is fine.
cosmetics?
They don't give you power, right?
So you're
anything-
talking about actual items being gate kept.
Anything that could give you power, like let's say it's skill points or so, like you need to do XYZ to get a skill point or something like this in PvP. No, anything that somehow builds your character, whatever it is, anything that gives you power. Yeah.
So what if they get gate kept something behind PvP, but the amount of time invested to reach that period in PvP is not very high? You don't have to PvP all day long, but you have to do some and do something to unlock this certain thing. What about that? Are you still against that? Or is it no gatekeeping ever?
No gatekeeping behind PvP, anything ever. That's for it for me. That's why I brought up the point earlier today, like earlier in this discussion. I would never put anything behind PvP. I would personally don't mind, but I know, or I feel like for the grander concept of the community, this would be a bad thing. I'm not sure. Like, this is a very strict opinion, and I'm sure some of you have different opinions, so go for it. Like, Leviathan, how do you feel about that one? Should there be something that is PvP specific, like a crown or something that's giving you some kind of power? Where's the line for you? Where would it go too far?
Well, okay, so let's not conflate two things.
Mhm.
I do believe that for PvP, I think you should have ways to stand out, because I think back to like WoW with like gladiator titles and stuff like that. Like, this is going to be an open world game where you see players, right? So we're already keying in on individuality and hoping that there are ways to be distinctive between each other. And I can't see a better mode for that than if you truly are going to be someone that focuses on PvP. Like, we're really leaning into MMO elements here, where like they're going to be raiders, they're going to be PvPers, maybe people that just enjoy the story, whatever. If I want to show off that I am like one of the best PvPers in Westmarch, then I would like something that reflects that, whether it's a title or a transmog that I can just throw on real quick. And the only way I got that cape or I got that title was from getting enough shards in PvP or like enough kills in PvP or something. So none of that is power. I don't ever want there to be like, here's the ultimate helm for finishing out your rogue build and you can only get it from PvP. Like that would be really bad. But just stuff that is tied directly to that mode that shows you have dedication to that mode and allows you as a player to individually say, this is what's important to me. I think that matters a lot.
Yeah, it's like we can even expand this to like maybe an example for like D3, even though we don't have PvP. But you guys can tell me if this is a fair comparison or if this is completely not aligned. Let me give you an example. When you start a season, you have to do bounties. You have to. If you don't do the challenge rift, you need to get Ring of Royal Grandeur, and the other example is going to be bad. Let's just say you got to get a Ring of Royal Grandeur. Like you need one, right? I hate bounties. Sometimes you have to do Act 1 bounties 10 times at the start of a season, which is a huge loss for your day one to get this stupid ring. And I'm not saying this would solve the problem, but I would be okay if Blizzard just gave a super insanely low chance that Ring of Royal Grandeur could drop in rifts. Not that you can farm for it in rifts and it drops as commonly as everything. The way to get it is to do bounties. But I am so triggered every season that I have to do bounties to get this ring, and I have to have it. It's kind of like the same thing. If there was something in PvP that you had to do it. I wouldn't even be mad if there was, let's say the ultimate rogue helm was in PvP. As long as it could drop in PvP with something better than a 1 in a million chance. It's like, well, this is the way this is the way to get it. The smart way to get it is to do PvP. But if you hate PvP, it can drop, but it's going to be a little bit tougher road for you. Is that a good comparison, or is that
I hate
total
compromise.
garbage?
I hate compromise systems though. Like you're taking away the importance of bounties if there are bounty specific items that now are no longer specific to that thing. You
I
know?
agree.
So like
And that's exactly what I'm trying to do.
Yeah, yeah.
That's exactly what I'm trying to do.
Well,
Well, he's not really doing that essentially because you'd still run the bounty. Like if you're a hardcore player, you would still do the bounty to get the Rourke because it's
more
like
efficient.
a guaranteed thing, right?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Right.
I don't like it, but I could see the argument for it.
I guess if that's the case, then why even like make it droppable elsewhere then, right? If the most efficient path is still going to be to go and do the bounties, then
people will
just make it a.
It does make it nicer for min-max because then you could get that really good drop of a Rourke just by grinding the game versus like having to grind bounties.
The main point in my suggestion, the only thing I was trying to accomplish is I don't have to do bounties. Right now, I have to do them. There's no denying it. I have to do them until I get a Ring of Royal Grandeur. Sometimes I do one set, I don't get it. Then I do Act 1.
Sucks to hate bounties, I would say.
I don't know. What game has a thing like where you're gearing yourself and there's not like a thing you have to do? Like if there's seasonals, if there's seasons in a game, I can't think of any game where you don't have to like do something every season.
Yeah, I think it's more
fun.
so is just having specific items tied behind specific play modes, and that I might not want to PvP, but the best item for XYZ is only acquirable in PvP, so now I'm forced into doing it, and I can see that's kind of like the trade-off if you want to add like more of a reward system into PvP and give it like unique items that eventually. For some spec, some class, their most rewarding way of playing the game is going to be PvP, whether you like it or not. And obviously that creates a negative player experience that no one's going to enjoy. And so maybe just having it as a way of getting high-end items, but maybe not unique items or items that are unique to PvP would be a way of going about it.
All right.
And keeping it to more like cosmetics or titles like Leviathan was saying.
I think we've gone pretty deep on this discussion about should there be more skin in the game. I think we5 answered for us. It's kind of a yes. We would like to have more skin in the game than what has been presented. But overall, the PvP system itself, I I don't think there was anybody who really spoke against it, like the purification process, collecting shot, and all that stuff. So I guess we're good with that one. It's a functioning system from a different game, and stealing from a good game, stealing working systems is not a bad idea. This is also something that Llama has pointed out quite often in the previous episode, and he was referring to D2 at that point. Now, there has been one thing that we've touched upon slightly in this discussion, and it's about hardcore in PvP. And we had a question in the interview about this one, so let's listen in. This question is by J Murder, also known as Husband. Let's listen in, starting.
So as a hardcore player, I'm a little interested in the PvP permanence. Is a PvP death permanent like it would be if you were killed by a monster or boss? If so, there seems like a lot of risk, and the rewards would have to be worth that risk. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so not at the moment. The game is under development. Please tell us, all of you hardcore players who really are excited about this mode, please tell us what you want with regard to that, and you know, we'll incorporate that into the conversation. You know, we also get feedback from our team on things like this. We think that, you know, as you alluded, that if you lose your character when you're playing in the fields of hatred and hardcore mode, that they might be desolate wastelands because everyone is afraid to enter. There are, you know, there are certain things that, you know, we want to treat hardcore with respect, and we want to make sure that the rules that the players expect it to have from past games, that we're being consistent with those rules. We did add something called the Scroll of Escape, which is it's a very rare consumable item. It drops in hardcore only. You're not going to have 50 of these. You're not even going to have 2 of these. You might have one. If you have one, you're going to treasure it, but it can be used to escape any dangerous situation, whether it be a boss fight or other situation. If you are disconnected, we are very, very fast about determining whether you've been disconnected, but there is because of the way the internet works, there is a moment where you might be disconnected and we don't know yet. In that case, we will, and in that case, if you're playing in hardcore and you have a Scroll of Escape, we will use it. The Scroll of Escape is not guaranteed free get out of jail card though, because you're going to end up in a random location in the world. You could end up in one of the fields of hatred, in fact. But you can use it. You could use it in the fields of hatred. You could use it in a boss fight. So we know.
That's delicate, so thank you for answering.
All right, that's a stop. Now, Jory mentioned that he'd rather have the hardcore players that play hardcore answer this one. So I'm going to mainly direct this one to Leviathan and Neinball. I think Neinball, you also played a bit of hardcore here and there. So Levi, how do you feel about permanent death in hardcore via PvP?
I like it. And I think this actually loops perfectly back into the conversation we were just having. I like the original idea. However, it's going to be insanely risky. So like the skin in the game should be commensurate to like make me risk going in there, right? And I imagine like what's going to happen realistically is that hardcore players will develop a certain set of gear that they're willing to risk to go to these PvP areas. And if you do die and lose that, well, you've already stashed like your PvE stuff or like maybe your most cared for items. So like it should still allow you to play the mode. But I think having the pink slips on the line, like, you know, hey, you think your build's better than mine? Let's go, dude. Meet me at, you know, whatever place and we'll PvP it out. Like you can finally get all those chat backseaters to come and see you and destroy them. It should be great.
How about you now?
Yeah, I think that goes perfectly into it. It's like when you go through and you sign up for going and playing hardcore, you know that any misstep is going to, you know, lose your character, you know. And if PvP ends up being like the thing that you really want to do just for the sake of PvP, then you'll probably end up going to softcore unless you want that rush of always having the character on the line. But it also kind of goes back into is that maybe should PvP and hardcore have like expedited rewards? But even then, that still kind of goes back against it because hardcore is supposed to be the same exact game, except I lose my character if I die. So
Right.
going and adding too much to it, even like that, like that scroll of escape, might be compromising it a little bit.
And the scroll of escape was interesting to me because I wasn't exactly clear on its rules. So it sounds like
Mhm.
it's something that a player can use to essentially just get out of a bad situation. Like it's almost like a self-activated cheat death. But then he mentioned there would be a time where, like, if the game was slow at noticing you disconnected, it would use it for you. So then, like,
I
what's the rule for that activation?
I think what it was, what he was going through and saying is that like when if the game finds that you've disconnected, that if you have one of those, that it will just automatically use that, and so that way, it will use that as kind of like your free escape, as opposed to just kicking you off of the game and like ending the boss fight or whatever.
The idea probably is something amongst the lines like, since you disconnect and you render your character being, you can't control it anymore, right? And you're gonna die. In D3, we have a disconnect time of 10 seconds. So you're gonna stand there for 10 seconds, and that's in most situations certain death, right? In PoE, it's 6 seconds, and that's also in most situations certain death. And I guess at this point they wanted to come, like, if there's one thing that you still could do, you would choose to randomly teleport out to anywhere else. It's not in town because town would definitely save you. So essentially you're rolling the dice on whether or not you will survive a disconnect here, if you have the scroll. Now, whether or not the idea and whatever it tries to solve, like, does it really solve disconnect deaths? Not really, you can still die. Now it's just I know I died when I just disconnected, to maybe I got lucky and I got teleported to a dank spot in Sanctuary where nothing happens. So whether or not that makes it better, I don't know. I'm not a hardcore player. And what exactly from a design perspective it tries to solve, I'm not sure. I feel like the uncertainty can also be a lot of pain, not knowing that you actually died.
So what I think they might be trying to solve, and I could be wrong here. I think they might be trying to solve people hitting the disconnect button when you're in a bad situation and it auto saving you.
Yeah.
So if
That-
the
that's-
scroll
that's
would
what I'm
always
picking up
bring you
too.
into town, essentially. Like, if the scroll
Well, I
always
think
brings you
it's-
to town, okay, sure.
I think it's more so is that you're going through and you're hitting that disconnect button to try and save your character because you have death staring at you at your face. So I'm about to lose my character, so I'm just gonna quick exit game or disconnect or something along those lines to like save myself. But because they have kind of like that savior mechanic in there in the scroll of escape, that they're going to like try and penalize you for maybe trying to exploit the system by if you try to disconnect, it's going to use your scroll of escape for you anyways.
So
Yeah, like a finite logout macro, basically.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
So I have a thought. This is the first time I'm hearing this topic, and I really rarely play hardcore. So this is just a thought I had. Not whatever the hardcore people want, go with what they have. But I have an idea. What if? So the first thing I think about when I ask this question, should you die permanently when you're in PvP? The first answer is yes, because it's hardcore. And the other answer is no, because then no one's going to really try to enjoy the PvP mode when you play hardcore. So here's a thought that is still pretty hardcore, but you don't literally die. What if when you die in a PvP zone, that character can never enter that PvP zone? That zone is dead to you. You can't PvP anymore. I don't know if there's going to be multiple zones. Let's say there's 3 of them. Let's say there's 3, A, B, and C. Let's say you die in A. Maybe that hardcore character can never either PvP in any of them, and you lose the chance to build up the shards for that transmog set or whatever. Or maybe you're only locked out of A. You're dead to that zone and you can't come back. It lets you PvP in that zone until you die, and then you get to keep your character and keep playing, but you can't PvP in that zone anymore. might be a more hardcore way to PvP, but you don't lose everything. And it would also encourage people, as Leviathan said, to actually equip your best stuff and go in there. Show how powerful you really are. Because then if you die, well, you can't PvP anymore, but at least you got your stuff. I don't know if hardcore players would like that, but that came to mind as a solution that might let people enjoy it, but still have a huge penalty if you die.
Levy?
I think a good compromise for hardcore, hear me out, will be the
Go ahead.
semi-hardcore. Right? So you go in there, it's hardcore. Okay, you don't want to basically confirm that hardcore players are going to die in PvP, because then they would never go to PvP. Like, why increase your chances of dying? But what if you went in there to PvP because you enjoy PvP, but you lost an item? Like 100% guaranteed if you died every time.
I see where you're going with that. My flash instinct to that is that's not enough. I think the hardcore players play it with the idea they're going to lose everything. I think losing one item is not enough of a penalty. I don't know how Leviathan and Neinball feel about
Let's
that.
ask the hardcore players, the two that are here.
Go ahead, Nine. Sounds like you had something.
I do actually. I had never even thought about that aspect. Maybe it going through and locking out, either like permanently or temporarily from the zone, would be an interesting compromise for it. But it does bring back one of those things, like going back to the early days of Diablo 3 when they had announced the arena system that never formulated. People were going and talking about hardcore PvP back then, and they were saying the math itself just doesn't work. You'll have like 1,000, 10,000 players, and after just like 7 rounds, you'll have 12 hardcore players. Because if people have to die, you're basically going to be losing huge chunks of the player base every time that you go into like the PvP. Now this one has some PvE elements to it, so just because you're in PvP doesn't mean that you're actually having to actively engage and kill other players for it. And that could be one of those ones where the system itself in hardcore turns into more of a cooperative thing where you're not flagging hostile, you're not going and specifically hunting down other players, and you're just helping each other kind of like kill mobs, or I see that Leviathan is over in the volcano, so I'm going to stick to the salt flat zone in order to go through and just kind of like keep it separated. But it could come up with an entirely different ecosystem in hardcore than it would be for softcore players.
Yeah, that's an interesting response. I think it kind of harkens to this idea that like hardcore players are going to figure out exactly how to interact with it based on whatever rules eventually get established with it. The lockout thing I find to be interesting, but I also feel like it just, like, if I take it and extend it to its ultimate conclusion, it's just a minor annoyance, because you're just going to take all the gear off that character, delete that character, and make your character again. So you essentially have killed it, but like you're going to want to get back into PvP if you cared about PvP in the first place.
That's a good point, yeah.
Excellent point, yeah. I didn't see that one. Excellent point. That actually bricks the idea for me. I was like super in favor of it until you brought up this point. And that's like that kills it for me.
Is there a way, I mean, is there any way that you guys could think of that the idea could stand and you couldn't solve it by doing that? Like all the gear you were wearing there can't be used in the zone anymore.
So
I think that the more graceful solution would to just be make the lockout temporary, whether it be like a day or 2 days, or you have to wait till reset or something along those lines, as opposed to being permanent. Because if you make it too restrictive, just like Leviathan pointed out, there's going to be ways that you're going to go through and either like kind of like get around it, or like you're saying, where like that piece of item can never be used in that zone again. With what's the development cost on that side? Is it even worth it for the developers' time to try and make that coding into it, to try and solve? You have a problem, and now you're creating another problem in the solution.
Keep reset timers out of Diablo. Keep that in World of Warcraft, please. No reset timers whatsoever in RPGs.
All right, since we're really like, we're in the realms of discussing hypothetical solutions here. Usually this podcast is not too much about discussing solutions, but rather discuss the problem. Even though it was a very interesting point brought up by Rex, and it got very quickly debunked by Leviathan in a sweep. I loved that one. That was amazing. So the takeaway here is, let's once again focus on the hardcore players here, so Leviathan, Neinball. I hate to do this, but, yes or no, like, shotgun to the chest, permanent death, PvP, yes or no? If you could make the decision. Okay, Neinball.
I think in order to go and keep it true to the tradition of hardcore, you'd have to have permanent death, but it probably would not be it wouldn't resemble anything close to what it would be in softcore.
All right, Lord Fluffy and Rex, if you have opinions on this one, feel free to share. Yes or no?
Hardcore, by the way.
Okay, I didn't know. Yeah. I'm sorry. You don't strike me as the hardcore.
If you die, you die. It's hardcore. There should be no special rules.
Rex.
I think if you die, and if they don't go with permanent death, it needs to be a severe penalty, some kind of extreme penalty.
All right. Then let's move on to the next and last question we had on this panel in the interview section. This one comes from Peachild, I believe, and it's about I think gear balance, if I recall correctly, or just PvP versus PvE balance. Let's listen in. Start.
Hey, will there be separate gear sets for PvE and PvP? And can you talk about how you're going to balance PvP without throttling PvE's content?
There are a wide variety. So there are many different affixes, regular affixes, legendary affixes, unique items that could be useful for PvP. There are not currently any affixes that are anything that are exclusive to PvP, like that only work against players or anything like that. We want to have a large pool of items that players can draw from and discover and find things that are very useful in PvP or things that are very useful in PvE, and we plan to continue adding items like that, and certainly we'll keep an eye on what's happening in terms of PvP if something seems out of whack.
All right, stop. How do you guys feel about that answer, and what is your takeaway? Fluff, go ahead.
So a little insight. Me and P crafted that one before the stream started. And I'm curious for you guys' opinion on this, because this is a really contentious topic. Obviously the big question here is, if we don't separate PvP from PvE, we automatically throttle the amount of items we can get added to PvE, because they have to be balanced perfectly around both game types, right? And that's a concern, right? So like, you got your games like PoE that just gets insane amounts of content, and they don't have to worry about PvP whatsoever. They barely even worry about PvE balance. It doesn't really matter. They don't have to worry about it. And so if we have to worry about that separate game mode of PvP, the creativity goes down, the volume of items we get every season goes down. It's a slippery slope. Obviously, you don't want to have to like, I'm going to go do PvP. Let me go to like the armory, switch to my PvP gear, and like that whole argument kind of sucks too. But I'm not sure. And then there's the other argument of, you have to react right away if it's PvP, because if something's not balanced, like say everyone is doing Meteor because it's like one-shotting people in PvP because this new item that was added this season, they have to react and nerf the Meteor. Otherwise, it's just going to be a PvP full of Meteor wizards trying to one-shot each other, and no one's going to go in with anything else, and everyone's playing a wizard. So, what do you guys think the solution is, and what do you like? I'm curious, what side of the fence are you guys on versus separation versus all of that? Because it's a lot.
That's a big question. Who wants to go first on this one?
I think you kind of answered your own question in the question itself when you mentioned GGG, and that like they don't even care about PvE balancing. Does it have to be an issue, especially when it's something when there's not even the potential for having any leaderboards. There's no like end of season rewards or anything like that. It's purely just in its current iteration, purely just cosmetics, and it's just you want to go out there in order to prove that you're the best PvPer, and there's not anything else really incentivized around it at the moment. Does that fine-toothed balance actually matter? Because they're not going at it, from an esports perspective. It's just we're including PvP for those people that want PvP, just like kind of like dueling was in D2. They constantly like lowered the like the damage coefficients in duels until they got to the point where it's just like, whatever, we don't care anymore. Just do
we
what you
want to
want.
rule out the esports factor? Because I would hope beyond hope that we don't want to rule that out.
I think didn't they already publicly say that that's not the direction that they're going in? I don't have a source.
I didn't want to go through and call that out, but I want to say that I remember that from
Same here.
BlizzCon 2019 that
Same
they were
here.
talking about that
What am I even doing here,
they
then?
really had nothing.
He's done.
He's done. No, I think that. So I'm also like 80% certain here that the statement was given to us at some point. I can't pinpoint it to a date or a panel or anything.
As long as it's not the Mandela effect going on right now,
I know it was for Immortal. That was like one of the key things they mentioned in that AMA. So I don't know if we remember that. But I do get the feeling that, I don't know, there was this sentiment at least around D4 that we're going to not have the focus on esports or like the focus on competition even. But maybe that's, again, it could just be like misheard information or telephone or something.
I feel like
Go.
Fluff's question. So the question is really like, what do you cater to? Do you cater to balancing at all, right? And what is the consequences of catering to the balance in PvP, essentially? It is an issue, I agree. But I feel like the answer was kind of given to us. Like, I feel like Joey essentially said, if it goes to whack, let us know. Like, that was like the last thingy that he said. And I was like, all right, so the quintessence is like, if it goes wrong, we'll probably fix it. If it goes really wrong. But until it's like, whatever. That's how I feel. Is that truly the plan moving on how they want to, balance PvP? I'm not sure. I would rather have a good PvE and like a lot of variety in PvP than to cater to PvP. But that's me. I'm not really a core PvP player. And I would go down the road of GGG, really. Like,
I mean, there's other avenues of going through and doing it, because there's other games. Although I hate bringing it up, like with Destiny and World of Warcraft at the moment, because they're doing absolutely terrible jobs in balancing PvE and PvP. But they have mechanisms in their games that allow them to balance like skills and items separately for both. That they can go through and apply like an aura modifier, like Fluffy in your example, like Meteor. And if it's too much of an issue, that they can just apply an aura modifier that when Meteor hits another player, its damage is reduced by 30%. So it has zero impact on PvE, your PvE experience, but it helps to address a balance issue in PvP.
But I guess that also is part of the core of Fluff's question, though, is like, now does that slow down development of the game in general? Because now we have this second line of text on every skill where it's like, okay, it does this for PvE, but also does this for PvP. And each patch, you have to readdress both sides of that coin potential.
Yeah. There's a significant opportunity cost to actually do that one. Yeah, agreed. Would you rather, so what would you like to see? Would you rather have that they do such a thing where there's a significant opportunity cost, but you get to have a very balanced PvP experience and PvE? Or would you rather say, I'd rather have the entire time spent in either PvE or PvP and just have excellent content there and excellent balance? If you could pick, and nobody would ever find out, what would you pick?
I guess, it's like if you're forcing me into the corner and saying that there's a massive opportunity cost, then obviously I'll take the better PvE experience.
Okay.
For the more content and such. But I wonder how much that actually is.
Yeah, we don't know. Like, it's hard to know. Fluff, how do you feel about that one? What would you pick?
Yeah, I separate them completely. One of the things we talk about all the time is the BR. You go in the BR, get a whole different rule set, different items, different experience altogether, and that's totally different than the PvE game. So that's my choice. No one knows, right?
Ryan?
No one. Stays between us.
So historically, and this could just be, caveman thinking, we might be on new horizons, which are much more sophisticated and much, could be developed into an esport, which I would personally love. But historically, I don't log into an ARPG and expect this very balanced PvP system. In an ARPG, I mean MMO, you can kind of expect that. In an ARPG, I don't have any expectations for that. A lot of an how I view an ARPG genre is just slaying monsters and getting loot and getting stronger and stuff like that. I wouldn't be upset at all if Blizzard just, takes a stab at balancing PvP, whether it's with auras and modifiers. I mean, unless there is an esport, I don't think you got to get it the PvP section absolutely perfect. No matter how good of a mathematician you are, an engineer you are, it brings me back like when I was studying it in college, and they give you these insanely hard mixture problems where you have to balance everything perfectly and do this advanced mathematics to solve it. This is even harder than that. This is like tons of different classes, tons of different builds. I don't know I can't even imagine how many resources you would pump into balancing it. I don't think you would ever get it perfect. So I would be okay if Blizzard comes up with a system that, takes a real good stab at getting it right and just throw it out there. And if something is super stupidly good, like it reminds me of there was one patch where Ret Paladins literally would like ride in on World of Warcraft to the blacksmith and just kill 10 people with one hit. It's like, okay, you guys got that. You guys added an extra zero.
There have been
somewhere.
multiple patches.
Exactly. You guys added an extra zero there that shouldn't have been there. The intern shouldn't have been designing Ret Paladins here. Other than that, it's not going to have to be perfect for me, or will I ever expect it to be perfectly balanced no matter how many resources they pump into it?
Then why even do it? Really?
Because it's fun. It's still going to be a fun game mode.
Players that came to your game to experience PvP are debated, and they.
Well, I mean, there's a difference in saying that when you go into PvP against XYZ class, that you have a 70-30% chance of winning because they're overpowered, and a 99 to 1% chance of winning because they're overpowered.
I agree with Neinball, but yeah, Fluffy. I mean, remember that's like our mindset on the panel, right? We're going in PvP bent on domination. We want to have all the loot, and we want the fields of slaughter to be filled with ears that we killed that we aren't even picking up because they're not worth our time. But some people might just want to jump in and do some PvP. Oh, I got one-shotted by a meteor and I'm not a wizard. Oh well, I guess that's where PvP is, and then they ride off into the sunset. I don't think everyone's going to care that it's perfectly balanced and they have a 50-50 shot against any class and build,
Yeah. I think that's the perfect point, is that it doesn't have to be, just because it isn't perfectly balanced doesn't mean that it's also just completely one-sided. So there is middle ground.
Can we correlate this to something else, which I'm not an expert on? One of my best friends is an expert on. He talks to me about it all the time. I think do any of you guys play Hearthstone? Extensively. I know Leviathan does. Anybody else play?
I used to a lot, but
I watch Battlegrounds. Does that count?
Sure. So the idea there is Hearthstone is a game. It's kind of like PvP. You battle somebody else with a deck of cards and you try to beat them. But no matter how their whole thing is balanced, right? You want everything to have a chance, but it never fails. It seems to be there always emerges, a couple decks that stomp most things, and maybe you make a specific deck that has a specific counter. But think about all the resources that are poured into trying to making that perfectly balanced, and I don't think it's ever happened ever, right? Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, you're right.
Yep.
So I mean, you gotta have like an error, you got to have an error built into, as Neinball's saying, the 70-30, that you're comfortable with without investing $20 million to try to make it perfectly balanced and, something like that.
So then the question goes back, right, to you. You got to do it or you don't do it. Like all those resources wasted into trying to make a perfectly balanced PvP/PvE mode, or do you separate them and not waste all that time?
Here's one thing that I'll throw out there. I think there's two factors at play. One is how important is PvP to the general offerings of Diablo 4. Like if it's supposed to be another endgame that you spend a decent amount of time in, then I would hope that it would be a fulfilling experience rather than go and get one shot and that's it for the day on PvP. So with that in mind, if say there's only 3 endgame things and PvP is one of them, that's a third of your content that's not that great to play. So if that's the case, then you would hope they would pour some resources into it to make it a bit more of a fulfilling experience. However, if a majority of the game is driven by endgame on PvE, then I think at that point you make the decision to let your PvP suffer a little bit because it's not the main point of focus, or at least like it's not 33% of your content anymore. At that point, maybe it's 1/10, and the other 90% is all PvE related stuff, raids, etc., dungeons, whatever.
So yeah, so the Lion thing makes a good point. To directly answer Lord Fluffy's question, if you're asking me how I would allocate the resources, obviously would need to see like the numbers and as Leviathan pointed out, what percentage do you expect PvP to actually be for someone playing it? At least at the beginning, I would invest resources into it. And the reason why is you only have one chance to make a first impression. And this is like one of the first times, an ARPG is really trying to make a statement saying, we're going to release a PvP system. If it is just a bunch of random one-shots and nonsense, that's not going to send a good message. And it's going to make people think, which it won't be true, but it's going to make people think no one on the PvP system cared. And Blizzard doesn't care about this game mode if that's what happens. So I think unless it costs $20 million, I would at least put a good effort into the PvP system and make an effort to balance it at least at launch and see how it goes. If it's a huge successful game mode and people really like it and maybe potentially can turn it into an esport, then maybe those resources are worth continuing. But I really don't think they can come in with a super imbalanced, unplayable version of it at the beginning. And I don't think they'll do that at launch. Otherwise, it's a terrible first impression that it's very hard to recover from.
That's a very fair point. Yeah. So would you be okay if the initial thing is kind of balanced in PvP is fun, but at some point, we get the information that, hey, with the next patch, while it might be a great content update for PvE, PvP might get wonky for some time, let's say 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 2 months, whatever, maybe a season, right? And it's been seen as like a little bit of a sacrifice, but it opens design space. It opens up for them to do some crazy things in PvE that unfortunately has some, consequences in PvP that might brick it. Would you be okay with that one? That's some design space for PvE is opened up, and sometimes in the future PvP might periodically break. Is that something you would be okay with, even if PvP would be an endgame system?
So I mean, that already exists in like World of Warcraft and Destiny, where they have teams that are dedicated to going through and trying to balance PvP in something just that they had changed that they make in PvE just makes it all out of whack, and it takes them months to go through and rebalance it or do something about it.
Would you be okay with something like this in D4?
Yeah. I'd rather be like PvE focused and then they react. Like they're a separate team that reacts.
I think that was kind of the answer. Like that was kind of the answer that Joey gave. At least that's what I took from it. I'm not sure what you guys took from it.
So I think like that, even in a broken state, it's still a different version of the thing you've been doing, right? So like it could be maybe less fun after a while, but you already have this expectation that it's a season long. That it's just the season of wacky PvP, right? So it's just almost like its own modifier for that.
So now instead of being dominated by the meteor sorceresses, we're getting dominated by the Reign of Arrows rogues.
Sure.
Right.
Sure.
And yeah, so I agree with what all you guys said, but I approach that question from a completely different perspective. That will happen. That's going to happen for sure. It will.
100%.
No matter if they have the best PvP design engineers, no matter what, the second the PvE people do something and if they don't coordinate and test and rebalance before launch, which is probably way too slow, that will happen. They're going to make some changes and it's going to break something.
Yeah, the question is, are you okay with it? That's the question.
And I guess my answer to that is you better be okay with it, because that is going to happen.
Right.
You better be okay with it.
Yeah, gotcha. I still PvP in World of Warcraft. I am living that right now. So yeah.
All right. I think that summarizes our thoughts about PvP in this quarterly update where we got some PvP info. This is kind of what the entire quarterly update comprises. It's the Rogue. It's a new class. It's the 4th class for Diablo 4. It's the first outlook on PvP. Those were the PvP questions that were answered in this specific interview. We're now moving to some other questions. Those will be a bit random, the way it feels. We'll be jumping topics a bit. And we're getting started with game systems. And this one is a question about SSF that I asked. So let's listen in. Start. So my next question is the design choice between game modes. Diablo is a very story-based game. It's a lot about isolation and desolation of a player. It's a private story, especially in campaign. Now, solo self-found is a game mode that a lot of people enjoy playing. It's something that is, a choice game mode in different IRPGs. However, for Diablo 4, we've never been given a design reason why and if solo self-found will make or not make it into Diablo 4. Has anything changed on this end, and if so, why?
I don't have anything to announce on solo self-found at this time. I will say that when we have game modes that lots of players enjoy, we look carefully at supporting those. We want to have lots of different ways for players to play the game, and that's why features like hardcore mode are making a return in Diablo 4.
What do you personally think about solo self-found?
I think it can be a fun way to play. I think as a designer, as a game designer, I will often play games and make up my own rules for the things that I'm allowed to do in them. And those rules only work if I abide by my own contract that I've made with myself. And I love playing games in that way, for sure. It's something that we have to think a lot about in terms of splitting the player base out, in terms of ways to support it, and in terms of what is the overall need for the player base to have something formal that provides that functionality.
Thank you. Stop. All right, I'm going to directly throw it to Ryan because this is the first time I actually heard this section.
Who's Ryan?
Raxxanterax.
Hi, Fluffy. Nice to meet you.
So how do you feel about that answer in regards to SSF? And what is your take on SSF?
Okay. So, believe it or not, even though I hardly ever play solo, I do think SSF is intriguing, and it is something that I would definitely try if it was at least one season or whatever Diablo 4 is going to have. I would definitely try it. As one thing that I think a lot of us try to do in as a content creator is we try to be ambassadors for the game and for the community. And I know how important that this game, I even know the people who it would mean the world to. I know it would mean the world to Leviathan and Lord Fluffy. I know it would mean the world to Bloodshed. I know there are so many people that would love it. And from what I took from that answer, and it seems like a very PR answer, is it's kind of like saying, you can always play SSF, just make a little contract and then you can do that. But that's not anything that's like formal. I would encourage, and I'm mostly a group player. Everybody knows Lord Fluffy calls me a robot. And if he ever sees me anywhere, that's the first thing he calls me. I'm always the group XP meta robot blasting with, whatever I can do. But I would still be a big advocate of this game mode. I think it would add a lot to the community. If Blizzard has a way to implement it, I would strongly encourage them to do it, even if. So I would say, let's say Blizzard is not doing it because it's conflicting with certain things, like there's world bosses and you can't kill them solo. So how are we going to do that? As long as the rules in the SSF League would be universal, like let's just make something up. Let's say, oh, well, world bosses function the same as in the other thing. You group up with people together and you kill the boss, because that's how the bosses work. As long as everything else was SSF, that would be a solution that would work for me. As long as they got the formal game mode, I do think it adds a lot. I would be a huge advocate and I would push for it, even though I wouldn't spend most of my time there.
All right, so your reasoning is essentially you want to give the justification of the game mode to the people that really care for it, even though you wouldn't participate yourself.
And so many people want it. I
Yeah.
think I don't have the data that Blizzard does, but I hear about it so often. I know it means a lot to a lot of people, and I think it's a huge opportunity for Blizzard to win them over. And I would love to deliver the message that you're going to get that.
All right. Anyone else?
Can I add one more thing?
Go ahead.
I think if I remember correctly, tell me if I'm wrong. Someone, I think it was from Blizzard, mentioned that one thing that they don't like about SSF is it would maybe diminish like world bosses for the other players, because then like they're segregated and they want it to be a huge open world, and they don't want, they want people to be interacting and social.
I don't recall that statement about world bosses.
No, they say that all the time. That's their trademark statements. They say we don't want to separate the community.
Yeah, don't want to separate the community. Yes,
That's
but
the same thing.
it has an effect on world bosses for other people.
Yes.
I mean, if that's what you take from it, I like the reasoning for separating, the statement separating communities or separating the player base is also something that Joey here said, right? He said, we're taking it very, we have to take into consideration that this might separate the player base. The question is, does it really? The person that really wants to play SSF will still play SSF, right? Just because the game mode exists, I feel that way. At least a lot of people do in D3. A lot of them. I mean, you might not, I guess, but a lot of people do it.
But where do you draw the line? Because then it's I'm sure people do it even when they say they're not doing it. It's weird. I don't know.
I mean, yeah, there's no formal mode for it, but
yeah.
Anyways,
if we're getting to everyone's opinion on this whole SSF, I'm glad one, Joe learned what SSF meant. Good for you, Joe. Last year he got that wrong. Two, yeah, I think that it was cute that he was like, oh, why not just self-impose that? Why? Which is also kind of adorable. But yeah, three, I think that the bigger argument here is, Blizzard always says oh, we don't want to separate our communities. We don't want to separate our communities. But I gotta wonder, I'm curious to your opinions about, is it better in the long run to not separate and hope that people stay on board with your game, but maybe they quit? Or is it better to separate and then have a diluted population and everything, and then people may be like, oh, I can't find a group, Sag, because there's not enough people in your game genre? I don't know. I wonder if there's any analysis on this whatsoever from Blizzard.
So, real quick, if I can ask a question that is hard for me to answer in my mind. What exactly is the point of SSF in Diablo 4 if there aren't leaderboards? Because they did announce they might change their mind, right? They announced last time there's no leaderboards for anything. They announced if there are leaderboards, it's going to be for things like fastest to do a conquest. If there aren't leaderboards, that makes me wonder, what is the point of separating it? Maybe that's
question.
Why.
Because this is how PoE handles it. So PoE, there's no leaderboard, right? But the idea behind SSF and PoE is that in Trade League, it's just too easy, right? You finish a character in a day, instantly, and if you're good at the game in PoE, if you play Trade League. Whereas if you play SSF, you got a whole new list of constraints that are going to take you way longer to progress. So it's that feeling of my progression is happening so much slower because I've basically penalized myself behind only getting loot that I find. And that is the draw for PoE SSF. And it sounds like that's what Diablo 4 is going for, because they basically shut down the leaderboards. And Joe, to respond to my question, he was like, yeah, we think that the builds and stuff, that's what's going to drive people.
We'll get later to the question.
Yeah.
Right.
So what's the difference though between them literally having a separate, if you're solo all the time and you never interact with anybody, what's the difference between just literally never interacting with anybody and just not trading in Trade League if there's no leaderboards to show that you've accomplished anything by doing it?
Because the distinction is important. The fact that so let me transport you back to 2012, 2013. When Diablo 3 had an auction house, there were no leaderboards, but there were people that wanted specifically to play self-found like iron mode. And it was hard to have the distinction there because you could impose that on yourself, but anyone looking at your profile had no clue whether you use the auction house or not. So if it's literally just you look at the modes that this character is operating under, and you know that the character has abided by these rules in order to get to whatever level of gear aspect it's gotten to. So to me, it just makes the contract formal, and also everyone else would be participating. Like there could be 15 million different flavors of SSF if there's no like one codification around it because you check the SSF box.
Hmm.
So that makes perfect sense to me. That it's not exactly the same as a leaderboard, but if I'm understanding correctly, the reason why SSF as a formal thing is important is for recognition. You want other people to look at you and recognize that it's not quite a leaderboard, because there's not literally a leaderboard where you sit there, but they could see your gear, and it's other people interacting with you and noticing that you have abided by them.
Well, I mean that helps, but it's definitely the enjoyment factor. Like I
For
would
yourself,
get zero
yeah.
enjoyment at a trade league PoE. Like
Yeah,
and
there's a
instantly
significant amount of players that will go through and they'll play Diablo from season to season without ever grouping with anybody, just playing solo, doing their own things, without even understanding what the concept of solo self-found is, because that's just the way that they prefer to play. Just they treat it as a single player game. And so that, going through and having that game mode there, like in D2, it was just single player mode. You just didn't log into Battle.net. And now that everything is always connected, always online, you kind of, in order to have that heritage, you would have to have that solo self found.
I
guess
want to.
it's
Yeah. I'm sorry, I
was
didn't
just
want to
gonna
interrupt.
oh yeah, it's just but to my question is, in that respect, from like the developer standpoint, what is the end game of Diablo 4 going to look like? Is it going to be a blend of solo and group content? Or are they maybe looking at it that solo self-bound, might just limit your choices too much going into the end game? And so they don't really want to support it because it's, contradictory to their intent for the end of Diablo.
That's a fair point. Yeah, that could be the case. Without a question, that there is specific group endgame content, and hence, because that's a large margin of what Diablo 4 should be in the end, if that's their intent, then it makes sense to preemptively lock out solo self-found. At this point, we don't know, though, if that's the case or not, because we haven't heard a lot about endgame at all. I want to spin the entirety of the discussion, like the conceptual thinking of SSF, maybe from a slightly different point of view. Let's look at hardcore. Now, hardcore is a mode where you do one thing, and it's you're restricting yourself to exactly one life. And that's it. Like conceptually, so like playing softcore and playing hardcore is the same thing. Just the only thing that is really different is you're restricting yourself to exactly one life, and everything else is the same. Now, that justifies a separate game mode. It justifies to separate the player base. Question now is the restriction of solo self-found, where you self-impose the rule that you are your own economy. You are all by yourself. You need to figure out how to power level your twinks. You need to figure out how to get enough resources to do certain crafts or to, progress with your characters. Like, you need to plan ahead longer with multiple characters. Maybe you need a separate boss killer. Maybe you need a separate trash killer, and so on. So you're self-restricting yourself in terms of economy, and you're stretching out the time you need to invest to get to your goals. The question is, does this self-restriction justify a separate game mode like hardcore does? I would reason that hardcore is there mostly or a lot because of tradition, because people are used to it. There's like so much. It's not only the adrenaline rush that the players have, but hardcore has been in every single Diablo game, and by nowadays it's tradition. And when Immortal does not come with hardcore, and that's a rough topic for a lot of people, and we see the topic arise multiple times. The real question at this point here is, do you think that it's enough of a restriction to justify it as a separate game mode?
So before I start speaking, let's go back to the first thing I said. I'm in favor of it. I'm in favor of SSF. People want it. Please add it. let me play devil's advocate and let me go from Blizzard's point of view as with Matt's question. And let's say I was sitting there trying to decide if I'm going to add SSF as a game mode in Diablo 4, and I heard Fluffy's reasoning and I heard Leviathan's reasoning. And feel free to pile on more reasons. But if there are no leaderboards in Diablo 4, which I really hope is not true. I really hope there are going to be. And if there are leaderboards, that's a super strong reason and would debunk everything that I'm about to say right now. But what I heard was, I want SSF so I have like a tag or an indication on my account. So if anybody inspects me or, whatever, that I have the prestige of saying that I did that. And Fluffy said that it's fun. You get enjoyment from it. So my argument as a developer would be, it's fun and you enjoy it, we'll play that way. I don't have to make a game mode for you. Go ahead and do it. And I'm not sure the first one is enough to warrant me making this game mode.
Well,
So
logistics. Go ahead, finish. I didn't mean to cut you off. I'm sorry.
So I'm done. So like, I want us. Can we build a better case? I'm saying to make them do that. If there's leaderboards there, there's a huge case. It's a huge difference. Whether if you traded for your godly build or godly set, or whether you found it yourself, that's a huge, gigantic reason. What other reasons can we think of to make a better case, I guess?
Okay. So one of the main things, like, it's hard to know exactly how to spin it when we don't know the full systems of D4, but just using Diablo 3 as an example, because it exists, you have all of these materials in your character's void stash, right? Of arcane dust, death's breaths, etc. There's literally no way to stop you from having those if you make a new character, unless there was an SSF designation that says this solo character exists in its own space and time. Therefore, you come out with a brand new set of, all right, it has 0 keys, it has 0 whatever every time I make this character with this designation. So just from a pure logistics standpoint, it makes your life way easier because you don't have to say like, okay, I started my season grouped, I want to do SSF. Okay, so let me write down I had 106 Forgotten Souls. Let me never make sure I use more than, or I get, below that, because then I had those resources from a non-SSF. Like it's just so messy. Like it's so much neater to have a check mark. And now even for yourself, say no one ever looks at your account. For yourself going forward, you can know that character existed under those designations.
That's a very fair point, right? So you can play group and solo self-owned in the same league. It's just completely separate, entities. Yeah,
so that's a good point. That's a functionality.
Yeah.
That would be very hard to self-impose. That's a good reason to add to our case, because I feel like we're going to need like multiple reasons.
I mean, sometimes it's even impossible, right? For instance, Paragon. Like, what do you do if you already gained Paragons, right? It's like, are you just not going to use them? But then Paragons become harder and harder to gain. So the more Paragons you made in group, the harder you impose the self-restriction and the penalty for solo later.
You calculate your total XP, and then at the end of the day, you calculate your end result, subtract it,
exactly.
And calculate how many Paragons you would gain.
There you go. That would be the solution, right? So functionality, logistics. That's a very strong case. I didn't see that one. That was excellent by Leviathan. Thank you.
I think you actually just made that more interesting for SVR in that respect. You added more to it.
Can we please not separate it? I want to do this shit. Yeah, exactly. Spreadsheet everything.
Starting XP, ending. Yeah, go ahead.
There's no way you can accomplish this currently in Diablo. You'd have to buy a separate account.
Yeah.
And then say, like, basically, I'm only going to play this account SSF Smile and hope people believe you.
Yeah, or choose to... That's what other players are doing, like 2x Hero, right? Just play the different realm. Like, go to EU, I guess, and then you have, like, high ping and not the same friend list, and it's weird again, so there's still some functionality, but I agree.
You guys are going to love what I did for it. When I was doing a hardcore run on T16, which I was unsuccessful, by the way. It's, like, impossible. Good luck killing the butcher. Okay. But, I was like, how am I going to solve the problem of all the stuff I have? Oh, I know what I'll do. I'll just go to the blacksmith in Kadala and I'll buy everything until I have nothing on my hardcore account. Oh, there we go. And then I went. Wouldn't advise that one.
All right.
Lost everything.
So let's wrap this topic up. That was a very tense discussion about SSF. I enjoyed that one a lot. Rex
I think
already...
SSF is the new hardcore too, because you talk about how hardcore is like
Yeah.
this staple, right? It's this
Yeah,
like
it's
thing
a
that people
traditional
want.
staple. Yeah,
It's
exactly.
traditional.
Yeah.
I think that our SSF is like the latest and greatest new tradition. Honestly, I think
I-
we'd be
I
surprised
feel-
to see game not do it
I-
going
Yeah,
forward.
I feel
I
the
would
same way.
actually be willing
And
to
so
say
many
that there
are.
were more people. There were more people that played single player in Diablo 2 than played hardcore.
Interesting. We unfortunately don't have stats on this, right? I don't
Yeah,
think so. Right. Now, Ryan brought up, so Rex brought up a very fair point. It's like, if there are leaderboards, there is a stronger case, right? Because there is a place to show your results and to have some prestige, right? And there was a question by a brilliant community member about leaderboards in this panel. Let's jump right into it. This one is by Lord Fluffy. Starting.
I thought you
Wait.
said he was brilliant.
Hey, Lord Fluffy Face of Diablo. Is there? I see in other games a large portion of development time is spent on a low percentage of high-end players, a sort of trickle-down hype tactic. Whereas in Diablo 4, we saw that the leaderboards were scrapped pretty early on, which is pretty much the only high endgame activity to do in D3. What do you anticipate will be the direction of these high-end players in D4?
So to set the record straight, we haven't made any announcements about leaderboards in Diablo 4. Yeah, we expect that a wide variety of players will be able to play and enjoy the game, including high-end players. And if you take a look at some of the recent changes we've made to the skill and itemization systems, where we think that depth and variety of possibilities and the ability to explore and create your own builds are key aspects of that kind of appeal to that player base.
Stop. All right, Fluffy, you go first.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much to unpack here. He said we haven't announced anything. He's not wrong.
So
but
was
he
that
is
was that
a
a
little bit.
okay? Was that a psychological game by you? Was it like you're specifically stating something that is incorrect to spoof more information?
No, I actually
Okay.
expected him to like remember his own words, I guess.
I was gonna say, didn't they? They definitely
Okay.
said last BlizzCon that leaderboards
Mhm.
are gonna like change or not be a thing. I mean,
Yeah, the leaderboards as you know it will no longer be a thing, is basically what was said.
Yeah.
So
And
and he's
the-
the one that said it. Joe Shelley is the one that said it. So it's like,
yeah, but does that state that they will
No.
not exist?
Yeah,
No,
that
he
doesn't.
said-
That's very
He-
different
yes,
from
okay.
saying they won't
he
be
said
there.
he said that they
Statement
would
was-
exist. He said that they would,
I
just
mean,
they'd be different, right?
Yeah.
yeah. So the statement he made was, so really the leaderboards as they exist right now, it only affects like 1% of the player base. So that's really not impactful and not a direction we want to go with leaderboards. So when you think of like achievements in Diablo, and like maybe there'd be a leaderboard for an event like that or something like that. So basically, I mean, I don't know about you guys, but to me, that's a pretty clear, like, okay, well, leaderboards being hyper competitive, goodbye. Because achievements, like, it'd be like there's a leaderboard for a set dungeon. Who fucking cares? You know what I mean? I mean, and maybe that's toxic, but
That's very polarizing. Let's go with polarizing.
I agree. I agree with Fluffy, and I'm trying not to just think about, you know, there are some games. I'm sure this is maybe except for Lord Fluffy, because we know he's rank 1 in every game that he plays.
True.
But I'm sure that a lot of us are casuals in other games. I like the leaderboards in other games, even if I suck, because I like to see what are the top people doing, who cleared what, how did they do that? Let me inspect their gear. What spec are they running?
To be fair, that was not the first 4 seasons of Diablo. We had leaderboards without inspecting. All right. So this
Well,
is
right,
this does not need to be the same thing, right? Leaderboards does not mean that you can see what other players are playing. You just see how high they cleared.
And
So,
that's true. Even
I just
even
want to
without
separate
inspecting.
that. Yeah. Okay.
Even without inspecting, it's really cool to see. Oh,
Okay. That's
Leviathan
what-
did Challenge Rift 89. How the hell did he do that? Oh, I opened Challenger 21 and a little rat one-shots me. Oh, he
Sure.
grinded 80 more Paragons and now he's a god. It's like, okay, I need to go do some more rat runs.
All right. So Ryan, you really want to have competitive leaderboards. That's my takeaway right now.
I what are we gonna do if that isn't there? What else is
Yeah.
there?
Okay.
What are we
That's
gonna do?
That's fine. I mean, I feel like you have the same. Like maybe I'm just getting a different vibe, or an incorrect vibe with Fluff. What is your take? Like from the way you phrased that question and from your answer right now, I feel like you want to have leaderboards. You do. Do you?
yeah, of course. I think that there's, the question maybe was a little packed because I was trying to get the whole Chris Wilson GDC out of it, like where he was directing his statements towards like streamers and stuff like that. But yeah, I think his answer was interesting in the sense that it seems like they're going for more of a like Path of Exile endgame, where your entire endgame is how much depth there is in your own character, and like how could Diablo possibly accomplish that?
But you like the PoE approach, right? You believe that
I
PoE
love the
functions.
PoE approach,
Okay.
but we saw the skill tree already. We've seen the quarterly updates. How could you possibly have anywhere close to the depth that you need for a character to be the only thing you're pushing for in the end game? Like,
I do agree with you on this one. I agree that what has been presented yet on the systems that define your character is not enough to warrant the statement where it says that the true end game is building your character. However, that's the design goal, right? And when we ask questions in those panels here, right, it doesn't really matter if they want to change like Fireball from 150 to 170, right? What really matters is why do they want to make that change, right? What is the design philosophy behind it? If that's the goal, if that is their goal, they can still have enough time from my point of view, or they should take the time until they make it to this point. And it's our job to tell them it's probably not there yet. And right now I agree with you that it's not there yet. But if that is the goal, and if we get to this goal, and if that means we don't have leaderboards, then I'm okay with it. Would you also be okay with it?
No.
I mean,
No.
yeah.
No.
Okay.
Yeah. If it's passive exile level depth.
Yes, exactly.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
No.
Okay,
No.
perfect.
So
Leviathan,
I just want to.
Yeah? Okay, Neinball.
I just want to go and throw out there that when you look at, I'm going to be the WoW guy, that like a system of World of Warcraft that doesn't really have a lot of leaderboards. They have some for like, like very, very niche things, but otherwise everything is third party. Like the community itself wants leaderboards so much that there are dozens of websites and services and add-ons and all those other types of stuff that create every conceivable possible leaderboard that you could think for anything that might be in any way, shape, or form possibly competitive. So, there is the want and the need from the larger player base in those games that want leaderboards.
I can see that one. Obviously, because we have them, that's kind of like the self-fulfilling prophecy, right? So, Leviathan, you specifically said no. Why? Why would that not be enough for you for Diablo 4? If that is their goal.
Sure. Like, to me, I still want to get to a point where I'm doing things with a purpose. And to me, having a purpose of completing a build and then moving on to the next one, that's not enough of a goal, in my opinion. Like, when I look at some of and I hate to bring other games in, but I feel like direct comparison matters. Like, PoE to me is a game I sometimes check out of much faster because there's no I get to a point where I'm like, okay, my build's done, so what do? If I'm an altaholic, I just make another build, or I keep going for more currency. There's no finite ends to that. There's no you've reached the pinnacle of making the most builds in a season or something to that effect, right? So I don't know. I lose a lot of my motivation if there's no reinforcement within the game to say you should keep going because X. I feel like when I play PoE, I have to make up my own reasons to keep going, whereas I would rather the game to some degree dictate here is something you can achieve and get to this high level. Like the close thing in PoE to me is the challenges, and most people would say, well, that's cool, but I don't really care about those. However, if you look at Last Epoch, they have this arena where you can continue to go and try to get the highest rank on whatever class you are and things like that.
All right, before Fluff jumps in, let's give it to Ryan, because Ryan also said no.
I completely agree. I completely agree with Leviathan. You want to know what was my least favorite toy when I was a kid? Legos. All my friends like Legos, and I go, why? You build. It shows your diagram. You build it, and then it's there. That's it. This is Legos to me. I know that people will not. There are a lot of people that will not share the same sentiment that I do, but I'm playing stuff to compete. I don't care if I have a character that is 100% min-maxed and I hit for 1.1 million and Leviathan's character only hits for 9 million. That means nothing to me. Nothing. When I played WoW, even though WoW doesn't have leaderboards, and as Neinball said, the community is always crying for it, I was going for the title Gladiator, or if it could, Merciless Gladiator, Brutal Gladiator, Deadly Gladiator. I wanted to be rank 1. I wanted to be the server first guild that killed this boss. And when I killed the boss, I wanted to be first on DPS as the shittiest DPS class to tell everybody, you guys suck at your class. And if I rolled a Warglaive rogue, I would double your damage because you're trash. I'm a little bit less toxic than that, but nowadays. But I mean, if there's nothing to compete on, I know I don't speak for everybody. I know a lot of people play for this thing called fun. I don't know what that is, but if there's not a way to compete and cement what you've done for the world to see, I'm gonna check out super quickly, as Leviathan said.
Mm-hmm. I think.
Okay, so
yeah, go ahead, Fluff.
Lots to unpack from all parties. Okay, so Neinball, I agree with him in the sense that like the community will drive websites. You know, PoE doesn't have a leaderboard, but we've got Path of Exile. We got PoE Ninja, and you can be like, who's the top assassin Venom guy? Guess what? Spoiler alert, it's me.
Yep.
You know, that's fucking cool. So there's the competition aspect there that's solved 100%. And at the end of the day, what you guys want and maybe don't know that you want is that crazy complex endgame system for your character and be able to build out your complexity and like be on PvP. Like the start of a league, I'm at 2 million DPS. And I've fully ramped out a character that does Venom Guy. He can be up to 20 million, 30 million DPS. I'm not even close to that. I'm still like just climbing that DPS ladder for myself. And just like there's that constant progression that will never, ever stop as long as I'm in SSF. And that you just miss all of that. If your leaderboard is the only end game push, right? D3, we look at that. How fast do you get burned out in a D3 season? 1 week, 2 weeks, maximum. Maybe not you, Rax, because you're a robot, but like PoE, it's not there, but I'm playing much longer. And so that's my only basis for comparison here is, yeah, I want a leaderboard. I'm with you guys. We're same team. But if I'm picking between the Diablo 3 leaderboard and the Path of Exile game complexity,
but
PoE wins every time.
But what's the point? You've killed Maven 5 times already. You're going to kill her 0.5 faster?
Wait, but I have a different question. Was that an endorsement for leaderboards? Or was that an endorsement for SSF? For SSF, that was a great sales speech. But was that an endorsement for leaderboards or SSF? I'm confused.
Yeah, but what?
Yeah, we're not really discussing SSF at this point.
Yeah. I mean, part of the thing that I'm hearing is why not both? Can I be greedy?
I would implement both if I were.
Right?
I want a great end game, but I also want some sort of competitive aspect to it.
No one disagrees, I don't think.
Yeah, I mean, no one would disagree with saying we want more systems to, but in this world, that was the trigger was Joey Shelley's statement, where leaderboards, yada, 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 we want the true endgame to be build complexity, and then we're comparing to PoE, right? That was the causal chain that we went along. And then I made Lord Fluffy essentially choose, right? It's like, either you have your leaderboard, even though we prefer it, and right now we don't have the complexity to justify that statement, but assuming it's the design goal, if we could get there, like in a blink of an eye, would we do so, right? And some people here are no, because leaderboards are holy, and other people are sure, because I love it in a different game, and if that's the goal, then I'm with them, with those guys, right? Now, the real question is like, so why do we have such divergent opinions here, right? Like, what's the inner thing that drives you, Leviathan, and you, Ryan, specifically, to be so incredibly pro leaderboards that it doesn't make sense if they like, what is there to do? What do I do with my life in the game in there? Like, if I can't show it, like, what is it in you that forms this opinion? Is it the strive for competitiveness? Is it the prestige of being up there? Is it the achievement of right now being the best for this class? What is it that makes you guys want to have it 100%? And if it's not there, there's nothing to do in the game. For other people, there's still stuff to do. Like, Lord Fluffy is the proof of concept here. And I'm also the proof of concept here. I'm the same way. My POB, I have it mapped out. Double influenced items with elevated mods and all that stuff and yada, yada, yada. Do they make my character better? No, I'm already crushing the content, but man, getting it and then double corrupting it? Oh. So, sure. So that's what it does for me. It's like completion, like planning it out, achieving a goal by myself. That's completion. If leaderboards are there, yeah, whatever. So that I know that this is what drives me, but what drives you guys? I don't think we can make it like such a we are very divergent here. I don't think we can find a common ground and a common denominator. This is like an either or here.
Can we answer the question?
Yes, I'm sorry for rambling all the time.
Jesus.
Go.
Before they answer, I have a theory, and I think it's they just watched too much Pokemon as a kid, and the theme song got to them.
I mean, that is a great song. It did definitely have an impact.
It's very true. I think it
I want to
comes
jump
down
in
to
before Leviathan can say anything.
Oh my god! Oh my god! Leviathan goes berserk, dude. Let's go. Now, Levy, you have your 5 minutes of absolute freedom, and if anyone interrupts you, I'll kick them from the call. Let's go.
All right. I'm not even going to take that long. I think it comes down to content, because in the same way I look at a PvP game with essentially limitless content, because you're always going to have a new opponent that comes and challenges your ability to play the game at a high level, or just to get out of silver into gold, so on and so forth, in some of these other ranking systems. It's the same thing when I log in. I went to bed rank 1. Oh, what 2 other DHs pushed up? Now I have more motivation and reason to keep progressing my gear, to keep going further within whatever systems. Hopefully there's a lot of robustness and awesomeness to keep my build going, lots of levers to pull, so that I can try to surmount them. But if they're not there, then the most of the onus of the burden is on me and the game itself. And I would agree, like if the game is super fun and has a lot of like long-term progression for you to go towards, that should keep me engaged. But I will tell you that as a player that's motivated by other outsiders coming for whatever I have claimed to stake, then that helps a lot. And if it's not there, it would certainly kill some of the motivation.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I think that's the driving force. People ask me all the time, like, why don't you just play PoE? You seem to like it a lot more. Why don't you just play D3? Because you seem to like, they both don't scratch every itch for me. Like, I'm never going to get that D3 leaderboard excitement out of Path of Exile, period.
Same.
And I'm never going to get that character depth and excitement of pushing my character to the next level, getting a million more DPS, a million more DPS, a million more DPS. I'm never going to get that in D3. It's not even close. So, yeah, I mean, obviously the best of both worlds would be ideal here.
Yeah, but we already settled that. Yeah.
I think the 2 weeks is all you get out of the D3, and I think you get a lot more time out of the PoE depth. That's just my opinion.
That is it for you right now. Yeah, it's the other way for other people, right? Where they say, killed Maven, whatever.
But I get it too, because I can love the leaderboards, man.
So
I'm like,
I'm gonna make a bold statement here. Do you think that the world where people continuously work on a character, so the PoE advocates here in this call essentially, they are more focused on being a better version of themselves each time they play, whereas the more competitive players want to be better than, like, they compare themselves to somebody else and not themselves all the time. That is like the driving force is being the best at something, like having the prestige. Is that a fair statement? I don't want to step on anyone's shoes here.
For me, it's beating everybody else, for sure. For leaderboard. It's not like, I did better than my last run.
For me, it's the same thing. When I push leaderboards, I look for rank 1 when I play it. And to me, if I place rank 2, I'm the first loser. That's how I see it when I commit to a leaderboard push. That does not mean that it's the same for all of us here, especially for the people that really care for leaderboards. I nowadays don't anymore, but there used to be a different version of SVR.
Casual.
Yes,
Continue.
exactly.
So I can be highly motivated by both, and sometimes both at the same time, and sometimes one or the other. So definitely. So sometimes you'll compete on something and you'll try and you'll do really well, and then you'll compare yourself to how other people did it and they destroyed you, and you're like, holy god, how did they do that? I got to go back to the drawing board and I have to get rank 1. There are other times where the complete opposite can happen. You can try something and maybe you didn't do great and check leaderboards and you're first, And then, but that's not enough, because then you sit there and you're like, no, I might be first, but I wonder if I can double second place this time, or I wonder if I can clear twice as high as them. Just really, uh, dr- stab the knife through their heart and twist it or whatever, and just solidify your dominance. But just in pretty much any facet of life, I I don't understand ever the point outside of gaming or anything of doing anything, I guess, and not trying your best, and not not only giving not only outputting the maximum that you can do, but once you reach that, comparing it to other people and see if they just destroyed you, why? You go back to the drawing board. Do you need to rethink it? Do you need to execute it better? I'm motivated by all of that, and trying to, I don't know, just as much as you possibly can in the things that you care about, excel at them. And sometimes, like, for example, the Rubik's Cube, it's like, there are algorithms, there's F2L, PLL, OLL, that I know they exist. And if I sat here and if I memorized them, you could solve it in 10 seconds. But, I got to the point where I can solve it in like 50 seconds, and, that's good enough for me. So I understand, like, it's not everything in life where you go for rank one, you get to a certain point, you're like, all right, that's fine. Um, but yeah, I mean, the leaderboards to me are a tool that kind of fuels that passion of, I want to, extract everything that I possibly can out of D4. And with that missing, it will make me quit sooner, and it will make me have less fun and less drive.
All right. Is there does anyone have anything to add on top of this discussion? Feel free to do so now, or suffer in silence for the rest. Anyone? I enjoyed this a lot. Like, yeah, go ahead.
I think they're neat.
Oh, I enjoyed this discussion a lot. Even though it was heated in the middle, I gotta say, I love that one. I hope we'll have more of this in the future. I'm sure we'll get an endgame system blog post where we'll actually like reiterate on the entirety of the discussion again, just with more developer insights. And I can't wait for this one. So it was very interesting how this short answer by Joey actually triggered such a big discussion about leaderboards and previously about SSFs. And
there's a lot of psychology around, I think, the leaderboard in general. Like, you look at the Immortal week 1, and I was just like, I was like 3 ahead of everybody, and it was getting a little boring. And then Leviathan, all of a sudden, he's like, okay, like let's fucking go. And so he starts playing more. I'm like, okay, I guess I need to start playing a little bit more. And then I'm like fishing and trying to maintain rank 1. Like, Leviathan had just stolen rank 1 from me, and I'm like fishing to try to get the perfect rift, and I'm like really pushing Barbarian to like the maximum of its possible potential. And then someone links me a clip of Leviathan and the rank 1 rift, and he's just like speed farming. He's like, boop. I'm like, what am I doing? This is retarded. So there is that mentality too. It's like, well, I can't even compete, even if I wanted to. So, and then I'm done. Well, which I was already kind of done at that point anyways, but that was just like the nail in the coffin too. So like maybe there's psychology there. Yeah.
That's a good point.
All right. With that being said, let's move on to the next question that we have in the developer interview. And that one is about Paragon and endgame systems. Let's listen to it. Start. Yeah, my question is based around a small incremental gain that you get each time you play. We had last BlizzCon, we were told in the media Q&A that there will be a system where each time you play, you put in X hours, your character will be stronger when you log off, even if you didn't find necessarily item upgrade. Now, we know we have a similar system in D3 where it's kind of a bit outrageous, because nowadays in D3 you can't really guarantee the item upgrade, but you can guarantee the incremental upgrade that you get by grinding Paragon. Last BlizzCon we got the confirmation that for each PlayStation in D4 you will be stronger. Is there anything that changed on this end? Will there still be this incremental gain system? And if so, is it more clearer nowadays how it looks like?
That's something that's under development right now.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I'm going to go back Monday and we're going to review more iteration on that. It is, so we think philosophically that getting that relying purely on randomness, especially as you get better and better gear, um, to feel validated for putting time into the game is not, it's fine, but it could be better. And so we think that it adds value to have time invested in the game give some benefit. That said, we want to be very careful that we recognize that at times in the past, such as those you're referring to, that it can feel like grinding is uh, more rewarding than skilled play, or getting the right comprising the right items, that it can come to dominate that. We also recognize that having having a system like this that is uncapped further encourages unhealthy play styles. And so those are two key philosophy points that we're taking into our iteration on this feature.
Stop. All right, I'm gonna first on this one because I asked the question. I personally am very, 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 very happy with this answer. Even though we didn't hear any specifics, and I didn't expect to hear any specifics, the idea really was just to probe their mind and listen to the philosophy that they see behind how it is in D3 and how it could be detrimental to D4, if at all. The answer that I've given checked all my boxes. They are very well aware of what happened to D3, what are the consequences, and so on. So even though there's not a specific answer, didn't really expect it. Maybe, Endgame blog post will hear something about this one. Overall, this gave me a lot of assurance, and I can't wait to see what it will be in the long run. I'm just happy it will not be something like Paragon in D3. That's my takeaway. Not sure how you guys felt about this question, as well as the answer.
Skeptical.
Go for it,
I mean, so we've heard this, kind of speech from Blizzard for a while. I think Wyatt gives that speech kind of every year. I love to hear it, but about how, Paragon shouldn't be this thing. And then it's like a min-max of, like, you want players to feel rewarded just for logging in, but then you don't want to get it out of control, like D3. And so Blizzard's most recent iteration of that is Diablo Immortal's Paragon, which is capped Paragon, basically, which is not really that much more big brain. So yeah, I mean, I know if there's a company that can do it and figure out a way to do this positively, it is Blizzard, but we have yet to see them do something that's great in this department. And I think that, I mean, I'm gonna sound like the biggest PoE fanboy in the world, but I think that the way Path of Exile does it, where you basically, the longer you play, it doesn't mean you get more powerful, but the longer you play, you get more chances of being powerful, right? So you get more crafting materials that could potentially build you a more powerful item that will increase your character's power. And you will have that advantage over players that play less than you. But at the same time, that player that plays less than you could just get a better drop, and he's, just going to be better. So I think that that's the kind of the best of both worlds. But that obviously is contingent on D4 having a really cool crafting system, which we really haven't seen that from Diablo or Blizzard in a while. So
I think you just nailed it right there at the end. On the Westmarch workshop, Dreadscythe was mentioning one of the things he hoped we would hear about this weekend for Blizzconline was the crafting system, because it's going to be such an instrumentally important part of the game based on how deep it is. If it's lacking a lot of stuff, then I think it does obviously shallow out the game a bit. But there are so many other sorts of like end games and character customizations and things that'll be tied to crafting and just how our characters should be progressing. Obviously, that PoE model fits in when there is robust crafting. So I don't know. I do have hopes that, like, if they go like a Paragon or Prestige system or something that allows you to like go beyond max level or whatever it is, that it won't be something that could be botted or like is just watching a bar or something like that. Like, I guess I fall in line with SVR's hopefulness that the philosophy here sounds correct and they just execute it, find a system that works. But it does wait to be seen because we haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, hearing the word incremental
No.
gain system over time is dangerous. Per se, that's like, red sign. It's like, oh my god, really? Again? So that's how it feels. And on that end, yes, I'm doubtful, but like the answer that we're given without like being given the specifics, that's what I wanted to hear. It's like they are aware of what went wrong. Can they find a tool set to give us an endgame system like this that such that it doesn't break? That's the real hard part, right? And once again, we're not really here to discuss solutions, but once we see it, we'll be able to dissect it, right? And we'll be able to give feedback and hopefully steer it into the right direction. I guess
pretty
that's the
good
hope.
at telling you what you want to hear, though, and then.
So
Do you have the
before.
feeling? Yeah. Do you have the feeling? So that's true. Like from speaking from historical events, it's true. But do you have the feeling that that's also the case with the new D4 team?
You're asking me?
Yes, I'm asking you.
I mean, everything we've seen so far. I mean, I love Blizz, man. I love the dudes over there, but like everything we've seen, man, is so casual that it's. No, I don't. I don't have
Okay.
that
Yeah.
hope. Maybe.
Sure.
So
That's fair.
To real quick talk about like the infinite progression, the incremental stuff. When I think about that, the thing that pops into my mind is a pie chart. So a little pie chart, and when I think about Diablo 3, the little wedge allocated to Paragon, with the fact that you get +5 main stat every single time you get it, and with how easy it is to get it, at least up to 5,000 or 6,000 gons, that wedge is way too big, right? It's way too it's too significant of an amount of your character's overall power. So to me, whatever system they come up with, it's uncapped, it's capped, it's you do get something all the time or you don't, or it's based on crafting, whatever it is. All they need to do to make me happy is take that little wedge of that infinite paragon, or whatever it's going to be called, that infinite progression system, and dramatically shrink it, right? Just shrink the possibility of it, and that is going to solve most of the problems. I mean, a lot less people would complain about the Paragon system in Diablo 3 if instead it only gave you +1 main stat instead of 5.
No.
Oh yes.
No. It's still power. The complaint is that you're getting power just for playing and getting it. Like, that's ridiculous.
Fluffy, do you know the difference
You're
between
the Mr.
power...
Llama of D3 right now.
I have to agree with Rax. A lot of it
you're wrong, Fluffy. 100% you're wrong. Go ahead, Neinball.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of it comes down to is where you're going through and you're getting your power sources from, and just the way that everything in Diablo 3 was just super multiplicative. It's that Paragon pie, would get larger with your gear. It was that segment that just kept making up more and more and more. Whereas opposed to like maybe I like the idea of having a capped system. I think that having the uncapped is just there's no way that you can balance an uncapped system. As the person that puts that bots or you're just have so much weight on the amount of time playing that who cares what any of the other systems mean.
So
Becomes
Rex, right now they made Paragon 1 instead of 5. You think the people would rejoice?
I think people would be happy, but let me put
You're
it
out of your mind.
Let me put it to you this way, Fluffy. So halfway to Paragon 6,000 is roughly 4,800. When you've reached that level, when you ding 4,800, you're halfway to 6,000, right? Did you know that the power level difference between Paragon 5,000 and 6,000 with no other changes made is not even 1 GR tier? Not even one.
You don't know you could just bot Paragon?
Well, okay, Fluffy, you're inserting into your argument. But you're inserting cheating, right? They said that they said this weekend, right? They're at least for, I think they talked about Immortal. Let's take cheating out of the equation. Okay. My point is, for an insane, massive amount of time, even with +5 main stat, doubling your Paragon currently doesn't even increase your damage by 1 tier, and I'm talking about cutting it by a magnitude of 5. which means like easily like a Paragon 4800 is almost as strong as a 6,000 person. What I'm saying is at some point it becomes insignificant to keep grinding it, even though it's literally there.
But
All right.
how much of the population will ever reach that point? Like, so no one's going to rejoice. Oh, the marginal increase from 4,800 Paragon to 6,000 Paragon is still something no one ever reaches besides like the top 0.003%.
But it helps you the whole way, Fluffy. It doesn't start benefiting you at 4,800.
Weird argument.
It means that a Paragon 2,000 player is almost as strong as a 3,000 player, is what it means.
But it's still okay. Anyways,
I feel you guys have the right understanding of the situation, but you just come to a different conclusion. Mathematically speaking, yes, right? Like reducing that one, there is diminishing returns on intelligence, Paragon, whatever, right, on main stat. So there's less that you get out of it, but people will still, and I agree here with Rex on this statement, but people will still be pissed off about Paragon without a question, because it's an incremental gain system, and that's the problem. That's the problem that those people have. It doesn't mean that this is correct. That's not the point. The point is, yes, it has diminishing returns, significant diminishing returns, and making that approach faster does solve something for some people, but not for them.
Yeah. So just to clarify, I think what Lord Fluffy thought I was meaning is that if they do that, everyone's going to throw a Paragon parade. Everyone's going to be happy. Everyone's going to think it's a perfect system. I'm not saying it's perfect. I'm not saying it's nothing ever in any game ever makes anybody happy. What I'm saying is if they made that one change, it would significantly improve it. That's what I'm saying.
For some people, it would improve it. Yeah.
Well,
not
the only
for
people
everyone.
It's going to piss off are the people that go to 7,000 Paragon, right? It's going to piss off the elite people. It shouldn't piss off the casual people. Otherwise, you're just misunderstanding the problem.
Well,
if you're mad about,
you're still grinding to get more power just for playing. The system is flawed.
Right, but that change would significantly reduce the power that you get.
Yes,
I get what you're saying.
By a huge factor.
To just kind of like go through and interject in that particular scenario, because we're looking at Diablo 3 where that's it, that you have nothing else in order to go through and input into the system. While we're hopeful that like Diablo 4 that there will be other components, that will factor into this pie that Rax was originally going through and bringing up this whole thing. So there's going to be more to it. You're not going to be incentivized to just sink 1,000 hours into grinding Paragon. That you're going to want to go out and, like Fluffy, one of your examples is I'm going to go, instead of grinding Paragon or grinding experience, I'm going to go hunt crafting materials to try and get an incremental upgrade through crafting, or I'm going to do whatever form of mapping or rifting or mythic dungeons or whatever to try and get a chance at like maybe target farming specific legendaries or something along those lines. I think what we want is that more systems to grind, to get those incremental upgrades over
Not
time.
just grinding itself. Yes, absolutely.
I agree with you, but let me give you an analogy. Say you got a big bucket. Season starts, you go outside, and all of a sudden it's raining money. We all got our buckets there. There we are. It's raining $100 bills. We're all gonna, believe me, we're all gonna sit outside with our buckets and collect $100 bills. Then, 1 week later, it changes to 50s. And then to 10s, and then to 5s, then to 1s, then to quarters, and then to nickels, and then to pennies. And then at some point, I don't know when it's going to be, the 25s. Fluffy's rich. He can probably just leave at the 100s. At some point, he's going to say, you want to know what? I'm good. I'm leaving. But the incremental system, if you nerf it enough, you're literally sitting there catching pennies, and it doesn't matter. So at some point, an incremental system can give you such a worthless increase that it's literally not worth it for you to sit there and grind Paragon anymore. It's much more worth it to go out and grind gear and find the materials and reforge it and try to corrupt it or whatever that thing is. That's what I'm saying. It's like it nerfs the incremental increase by so much that it metaphorically becomes worthless.
I feel like that's not the point that Fluffy is trying to reason against.
Yeah,
I don't feel like this is entirely not what Fluffy is reasoning against. I feel like he's absolutely aware of that point, and yes, this is how it works. It's already how it works right now, just with 5 Paragon. Like each incremental gain will be less value over time. Like there is diminishing returns to it. There is asymptotic behavior. You don't scale to infinity with it. So that's given, right? Just weakening a bit, okay. The point is, like, if they make the change to attempt to make the system weaker, then it's a bad change because it didn't fix the issue entirely, right? It's still
Right,
an
it's like
endgame grind system.
Right,
That's
so
the issue for those people.
I think right now it's basically like you're solving a D3 issue because it exists, but the hope is that in D4 it won't even exist to begin with.
Right.
Like we'll just have more like intricate systems, so we wouldn't have to put in band-aid fixes like that.
So what is the issue? Because what I'm reasoning with this is there is a metaphorical inflection point where grinding in even an infinite system gives you metaphorically nothing. So
Because
what
there
is the
could
issue?
be a better system in place that matters more to the other side of those people, not to you, because you understand it in your mathematical way. Yes, but to other people, this is not the case. They feel like there could be a better system in place than this.
Okay. So if I'm restating this correctly, one of the problems is even if you have an infinite scaling system that at some reasonable amount of time gives you practically nothing for gaining it, the fact that it is an infinite system will be misinterpreted by people, and people will be less happy with it, and designing a system that doesn't even have the opportunity to be misunderstood is better. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, kind of.
Psychologically,
Sure.
yes, yeah.
Psychologically, kind of. Yeah. Does it make sense? I mean, it's an issue for some people. That's a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Like, there is a set of people that have an issue with that one. Hence, the issue exists. Whether or not that's reasonable to think that this is correct or incorrect doesn't really matter as long as there's a chunk of the community that feels strongly against it.
At the end of the day, we all just want a better system for Diablo 4.
I think that's something we can all agree on, right?
Yeah, I mean, we all want a better system. I sort of get it because it's kind of like shadow clones. We talked about it, how like people may not like something just because they don't understand it, even if it works. I get that, but it's like I also don't want to hate a system that works just because people don't understand it. It's like it's two different sides, but it's just like, oh my god, that. All right.
Do you think that there's people that don't understand Paragon?
I think there's a lot of people that it depends on what you mean by that, Fluffy. It depends on what you mean by
Grind the game, more power.
They know that. That's what they know, but they don't know like, and I'm not trying to get like really deep in here, but like the mathematics of it. They don't know like when is a good time to stop. And right now in the game, it's busted. It's way too high as the time to stop because it's too valuable right now to just blast XP. It ruins it for a lot of people. It's a busted system. There, you got no arguments from me there. But you could just change the numbers of the math, and then it wouldn't be busted anymore. You could just change the numbers, and that
So the
particular
flawed
problem
system becomes less flawed.
Yes, by a huge factor, though. By a huge factor.
But that's the worst. Like, why incremental?
Why have a flawed
like,
system to begin with?
Yeah, let's just go to something else.
I totally agree with you. I mean, if you have a better system in place, by all means, do it. I'm just saying an incremental system doesn't have to be nearly as bad as people have perceived it to be from Diablo 3.
I think that if any scenario happens where Diablo 4 has a plus power through grinding, that's not an immediate meme. There's so many people that hate Diablo 3. There's so many people that see Paragon, they hear the word Paragon, and there's an instant negative association. Blizzard should move away from this idea.
Even if it's correct.
PR.
Yeah, even if it turns out that 2 years apart, like 2 years later, it's like, oh, it turned out to be totally okay. Is it worth the risk of a bad perception on launch? I would say no.
And I I got you, and that's what I'm picking up from it, and that's probably true. All I'm saying is just an infinite progression system on its own in a vacuum does not have to be a garbage solution.
Yes, it can be correct. Yes.
Okay,
That's
what I'm trying
there
to
are surely implementations where it can be correct. Yes.
This is actually not to belabor the point because man, we've hit it
Yes.
a lot. But I guess like to make a quick comparison that might bring it home for some people listening too, it reminds me a lot about microtransactions. How microtransactions themselves are not inherently bad. However, how you employ them and what they offer can be very different things.
Yeah, that's true. All right. Well, that being said, we come to the very last question that we had in the Diablo 4 developer interview panel. This one is by Lord Fluffy, and it gives us a nice outlook on the future. So let's listen in. Starting.
Yeah. So can you update us on the current iteration of trade and where you expect it to go going forward?
So we announced when we were announcing the game, we also announced that there would be trading in Diablo 4. We think that trading is a key social activity, and it helps knit the community together in cool ways. We philosophically want to make sure that some of the best items in the game come from killing monsters. So we want to be careful about where that balance is between things that you can trade, because certainly if we go too far in one direction, nothing that matters will be tradable and it won't be a useful feature. And if we go too far in the other direction, you won't feel like there's any reason to do challenging content to get the best gear. We're iterating on the exact implementation, and I would keep an eye out for more information in the future about where, exactly what the details are of which items you can trade and what any restrictions will be.
Stop. All right. We heard the question and the answer, Neinball. What is your takeaway?
I mean, from what their philosophy is that they're going with it, I can definitely agree with that. There should be a limitation in place that I can't just roll up a new character, drop whatever form of currency or what have you in it, and have something that's fully decked out with the best gear in the game. In order to get like the absolute best or like that actual like class defining item, I should have to go out into the world and start killing.
Yeah, it's interesting. To me, this was kind of a wasted question because we didn't get any more information than we already had. We got this kind of speech regarding trade already, like that they don't want to have everything be tradable because then like what's the point? And so I felt kind of bad for even asking this because I was actually looking and fishing for a like an updated response. I guess like what are you thinking right now? Like we heard what you already said. What's the current iteration? Like what are you guys playing with right now? It's kind of what I was hoping for. And instead we just kind of got the same speech we got already.
I mean, to me that just means that they haven't come around to trading yet.
Yeah.
They're working on other things.
Yeah.
Do you guys feel like you kind of have to finish item first before you consider how to trade them? Is that it maybe?
Yeah.
Maybe.
I think it's cute that we got Yeah, go ahead, Neinball. Sorry.
I was just saying, especially coming off of the conversation that we just had, it's like if items are just going to be one piece of your pie for what your in-game character looks like. I mean, you can't even say that we can start tackling trading with just items when you might have other things that affect how the items affect your character. So definitely something that probably is going to be much later on in the development cycle.
How did you guys feel about the outlook? Essentially, like the way I interpret the end is like, next blog post, trading, guys. Like, was I the only one like getting this vibe essentially? Like, look forward to info upcoming. That's how I felt. Was it only me? Okay, only me. I guess.
I feel like they say that about everything.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say.
All right, yeah, sure. They will not say, "Oh, you guys got to wait like long before you'll get this answer." I guess that's true. They would never say something like this.
Yeah, I mean, before before Diablo 4 was announced, so I was just sitting there and just thinking about how Diablo 4 could be, and talking with different community members and all that kind of things and content creators. And there was a big topic of trading. And I was sitting there trying to brainstorm, like, okay, let's say you could design the game. What would be the perfect trading system? And I found it to be an extremely difficult problem to solve. I couldn't. There was nothing. There was nothing that I wrote it down. I was like, yeah, this is it. I feel extremely good about this. And then we got to BlizzCon, and then they announced, well, we're thinking about the system of common stuff you can trade all the time, the pretty good stuff you can trade once, and then the godly stuff you can never trade. And I remember when I just was just listening, and I just heard that, and I thought that system is like 100 times better than anything that I thought of. I'm not saying it's perfect or it's like the best system ever, but I was genuinely, I was either impressed with Blizzard or thought about how pathetic I was that I didn't think of that. But I thought, I thought that was a pretty good solution. And so, like you guys said, like once they have the itemization built out and where it's going to drop, and then they can start to, like mess with that system. I was very impressed with that, and I thought that's a pretty good one, and it was better than anything that I could come up with.
That's fair. Yeah. Trading is hard. Like, as per usual, players are not that good at coming up with solutions, but we're very good with identifying issues.
Yeah, I think the biggest positive thing here is no open trade, and I think David Brevik said that. The fact that Joe's saying that, I think is 100% to play. Open trade is awful.
So overall, with the philosophical design decisions that he presented here, we are happy. Are we? Like, I'm happy.
I'm happy.
The piece of it that's very key to me, the piece of it, if the whole system falls apart and they go with something different, make the best items in the game that you have to go out and find it. You change everything else about what you said to something else that you think is better. I'll be able to live with it as long as you have to actually go out there and earn the best things in the game. If you can just trade for it or swipe your credit card for it or any other monka-esque thing to acquire it, that is going to hurt the game for me, and I think the community big time.
I think we all can kind of. It's hard to disagree with that one, right? It's like,
yeah. Is there anyone that disagrees with that?
Yeah, exactly right. I don't think that person exists here. So yeah.
I guess the question I would pose with that is there anyone that disagrees that that's the most important part of their trading philosophy that they have announced? To me, that's the most important thing.
Yeah,
agreed.
Brevik said that himself, and it's weird to me too. Is you have these like hardcore group of people that are like, no. Open trade, Diablo 2 purist. The guy that made the game doesn't even think that that's the play. So it's like,
yeah,
how can you even still like believe in that like purist ideal? I don't know.
I mean, Brevik also said that if there was one change you could make in D2, he'd remove the stamina bar, and Llama was arguing why it should stay in the game. So.
Yeah, I mean, Mr. Llama is literally your purist. Like, he is the embodification of a purist. So,
yeah.
I've been sitting here trying to think, like, what's the purest harm of open trade? And I look at, like, obviously D2 had that, PoE has that, and I feel like it's just the shortcuts of the system. But here's the thing, right? I think for us that are willing to sink ungodly amounts of hours into these games, we would prefer there to be those grinds where like you can't just shortcut your way to endgame gear by someone favoring you and just saying, hey, I dropped all this stuff for you, or like, I don't know, like building up enough, because I think of the stories that some people might have where like I just got a bunch of chipped gems and I traded those so I could get a bunch of like SOJs or perfect gems, and then I made my way up through the ladder, like through my bootstraps of like trading low and eventually getting to some high tier stuff, and that propelled me to be a better farmer, and then I got to the really good stuff. I guess in a way that system will exist if they go with what Rax was mentioning, like the all common stuff, on always trading like more mid tier stuff. trade once and then the top tier stuff untraded. But like, I don't know. I guess I wouldn't want to kill this. I wouldn't want the system to kill some of the interesting ways that players have found to play, but also still enable those like super grinders to have a reason to be invested in the game and not feel like their hard work is undone in one fell trade.
All right. I feel like that's a good closing thought overall.
But wait, I want to say something.
Sure, go ahead.
I'm kidding.
Go ahead. Oh my god, you got me.
The last word.
I see. Yeah. Today was a very long, like episode 13 truly delivered. D4 is a very heated topic, and especially after BlizzCon, especially after we've got all the good and juicy stuff. I think this was one of our most like heated and combative discussions that we ever had on Danctuary, and I liked it a lot. So I want to say thank you to all of you to being here. Thank you to be incredibly passionate. I feel like one of the worst things that can happen in a discussion is when everybody just agrees, right? It's like, I think the technical term that the internet has for that one is like circle jerking. I think that is the technical term for that case.
That's
right?
what we do after the podcast.
That's what we do after the podcast. Exactly, right?
It's in the show notes.
It literally says so in the show notes at the very end.
It's right there after outro. Then circle
yes,
jerk.
exactly, right? So I'm very happy that we showcase the passion and like the diversity that comes into making philosophical decisions about ARPGs, and I loved it. I hope Ryan and Fluffy can hug it out later. They surely will. Just kidding.
I love Fluffy, dude.
Yeah. What do you mean?
Right.
I could yell at him in his face and just kiss him a minute later. It's fine.
The next episode of Danctuary will be tomorrow, and will be kind of the same thing, just with D2. So you can expect the same concept. We'll quickly discuss, D2 Resurrected happened. Everybody in the grandma knows. We'll take a look at the grouped interview, go over the snippets. The lineup will be BT Neanderthal, myself, Dobrunsky, Mr. Llama, and Deadside. This will happen tomorrow, same time, same place. D2, hopefully the same juice and the same combativeness in discussions, I really hope. And I hope you guys will be there tomorrow. Thanks for being here. Special thanks to my guests. Really enjoyed it. Everybody knows where you can find them. Find them, follow them. The Danctuary Podcast, out.